вітаю нашого волі, я полкового знамена, дивлюсь на нього я востаннє, у нез'ясованій журбі, всю кров мою зі скидання, воно вібрало у собі.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у щах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великой страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
О, бля! Игорь!
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 355 of the news, and it is fundraiser night.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, but before we even get into tonight's news at all, we have to, of course, mention the fundraiser, and an odd thing that's happening as well. We are running a fundraiser for Save the Children, of course, an incredible nonprofit organization that has helped out millions, if not tens of millions of children over its entire organization's history, and is currently a massive helper in Ukraine right now, helping to save children from the horrors of war and the front lines, and also other difficult situations. Another interesting thing that's occurred is that...
See that? PSYOP's donation just popped up.
And I'll explain this real quick. We're not seeing anyone's donations tonight. The only two that we've seen is the $100 anonymous donation that was mine, and PSYOP's $69 donation. Nice, right there. So for some reason, almost nobody's donations are showing up tonight. We don't really know why. They are being registered to the total for the fundraiser, but we're not seeing them anywhere else. So please bear with us tonight. Unfortunately, for this one night, and the only night we've ever seen in our fundraiser's history, we won't be able to call off massive donors to these fundraisers. We'll, of course, see it in the grand total at the top of the live chat and also below the video to the bottom right corner if you're watching it, but we won't be able to call them out individually, sadly. But still... Also, Donna Olson said, "What? I donated." You did, and it did show up. It is adding into the fundraiser total, but we're not seeing anyone's names. The only two we've seen are mine, which was listed as anonymous, and also PSYOPs, who put in $69. So if you want to help out the fundraiser, we're watching it climb right now. It's gotten up to 1.2, and it's moving on to 1.3. Please do so. It does help out children in Ukraine, and tonight I just asked that everyone, while y'all's names will not be called out if you were a large donor, help out, because that support does go to help save children in Ukraine, and regardless whether we're able to call y'all out, that support would be greatly appreciated by those children that will be saved by Save the Children. Moving on from that, we're going to be taking a quick break from the Ukraine war news once again to update y'all on the situation here in the United States and Canada as far as the unidentified flying objects go, and we have seen that a brand new flying object, an unidentified flying object, has been shot down in the area of Lake Huron. We don't really know a lot about this one. It was reported to have been hexagonal in shape, or octagonal, and it was shot down over the area of the lake. I guess you could say, its pieces of what it once was have fallen into the lake, and now the U.S. Coast Guard is in the process of recovering those pieces and then trying to figure out what this thing is. We, once again, have absolutely no idea as to what this thing is, where it came from. All we know is that it was, for some reason, flying over the area of Lake Huron, and it was then shot down. So, of course, we have a news link right there to talk about that. We're not going to cover that much because there's not a lot of information beyond its basic shape and it being shot down at around an altitude of 20-ish thousand feet. So that's all we have right now. And once again, like the other UFO that was shot down in the Yukon, once we get more additional information, we'll begin to report on both of those. Although it appears that information is not really coming around often on these objects and what they are. We're now going to be moving on.
Also, they suspect that the one they just shot down over Lake Huron was the one they lost track of over Montana, I believe, a day prior to this being shot down.
Interesting. Well, that one would have moved pretty quickly then, over 24 hours compared to, I guess, the Chinese balloon we saw before that moved over the entire United States in 48 hours. This one took 24 hours to cover a fairly decent distance. But moving on from that and on into our Ukraine war news, we saw that the cargo ship that was in, I believe, Mobile, Alabama, has finally arrived in Bremerhaven and is unloading its Bradleys and other vehicles that we're sending as support to Ukraine at the port of Bremerhaven. Here's the video. And we're going to mute it because it's a German guy saying it's in Bremerhaven. And we can see the first of the recovery vehicles rolling off. And we now see them lining them up on the dock to get ready to most likely load them onto a train and then ship them further through Germany, through Poland, and finally into Ukraine. We can also see some Avenger anti-air systems coming off, some normal Humvees, another Avenger. Those Avengers are pretty neat looking, I gotta say. We can now see the tug moving around the outside of the Ark Integrity. We see the Humvees right out there. We can also see what appears to be a mobile generator. We now see the Bradleys moving around once again. And that's the end of the clip. But once again, very neat to see, and it's good to know that these Bradleys and other support vehicles are being unloaded and will eventually make their way into Ukrainian hands for training and then on to the front lines of Ukraine to help fight the war. We're now going to be moving on out of Germany and on into our next bit, and also keep y'all updated why we still cannot see, and we have not seen any donations sent in rather than PSYOPs and mine. It has gotten up to $1.4 thousand total, so y'all are doing some effort, and if y'all can, make sure that it reaches the goal, because we're making some pretty fast momentum. In 18 minutes, we've already gotten to 1.5 nearly, and I know that we'll make it to 5K by the end of the night. And while we can't recognize our top donors, once again, I thank everyone who takes part and participates in this fundraiser and helps it to get to unbelievable heights again, even on Super Bowl night. We're now going to be moving on from Germany and on into Russia because we heard something funny today, and this will move us directly into the main point of our news tonight that is in the title and the thumbnail. Putin came out today and made a statement to the press saying that the Russian forces, or specifically the naval infantry, are fighting heroically right now. So let's listen to this. The Marines are doing their job well, right now. They're fighting heroically, both the Pacific Fleet and the Northern Fleet Marines. We help our comrade servicemen. That's right. Good luck. Oh, if only he knew. So, to give y'all a little bit of an update on the naval infantry, which is what he was specifically talking about right there, there has been an elite unit of naval infantry that has been sent into the area of Vuhledar to help fight and try and take the pretty much castle in the plains that Vuhledar is. What's interesting is that over the course of the past month, they've taken so many casualties, they're now being replaced on the line by the 72nd, which is an entirely Mobic-based unit that is made up of conscripts that were called up during the partial mobilization. This rotation is happening because the 155th has been depleted so heavily that the unit hardly exists anymore. And so, right now, was one of the last days, these were the final days leading up to the 155th completely withdrawing off the field and being replaced by the 72nd. But funnily enough, that rotation was completed a little early today because the 155th got blown away and went into a complete rout on the field. From what we know, the 155th is no longer on the front lines as of today, and they've routed off the field, and the 72nd is having to hurry and rush to try and fill in the gaps that the 155th have left behind. And we saw this today as the 155th Marine Brigade was filmed in multiple instances abandoning the field. And also this one vehicle here. So here's the clip. When you see this little BMP of the 155th moving around with some infantry over here on the left side, when you see some more destroyed APCs from the 155th, along with some recovery vehicles as well. We see the Russian infantry from that unit moving around on the road, crawling. It looks like some of them may have been heavily injured, and the Ukrainian artillery continues to fall on these damaged and destroyed APCs, making sure that there won't be any of them left. It's no longer the 155th, it's now the 200th and the 300th, if you get what I'm saying. You see the artillery still following on them, and it looks like some of the Russians have made a little bit of ground, although they are literally crawling. But you now see a Russian squad get up and move towards one of the damaged recovery vehicles. Most of the soldiers hitting the ground, maybe because they heard an artillery shell whistle over, which they did. One hit to the right. Now one of them hit directly to the left of the unit. The squad still moving forward is trying to appear to take shelter behind this recovery vehicle that's been destroyed. We now see them hiding behind it as the rest of the squad moves forward and starts to group up on the recovery vehicle, which is already a mistake. An airburst comes in, hitting the squad, looking like it takes out a couple of them, but the rest of the squad behind them still runs up directly behind the recovery vehicle to try and take cover there. We can now see the squad moving around without real direction. They were moving towards the recovery vehicle. Now some of them are moving out of the tree line and into the open. And that's a lot of guys. That's a lot of folks from the 155th right there. The artillery is still raining down on them, and while all of their APCs have been destroyed, it appears that the infantry are having one last attempt at trying to get out. But that airburst right there will practically ensure that none of them will make it out, as the entire squad, it appears, has been wiped out by that one shot. We now see more shells falling in a different area of the tree line as more soldiers of the 155th try and reorganize and at least fall back off of the field. When you see them dragging one of them, and that gives you an idea of how badly this one bit of the 155th Brigade was hit today. So badly that they're literally having to drag some of them off the field. We're now moving on into our next clip where we can see a massive group of the 155th. And let me go find it real quick. Let's see, I think it's this one right here. A massive group of the 155th Brigade started running for the hills as well. And I gotta mute this, but watch this. It's like a stampede. It's a human stampede of infantry. They are taking off. That is a full route right there off the field. It's not even organized. It's just a giant group of guys. It's like a rock concert crowd that is just picked up out of a tree line and has started running off. So, pretty wild to see, and I'm pretty happy to know that the Ukrainians have been able to inflict such a devastating hit on the 155th Marine Brigade today that they pulled themselves off the field days before they were supposed to have been completely replaced. So right now, from what we understand, there are open gaps in the line that the 72nd has not been able to fill at this moment, and the 155th have left wide open. So, hypothetically, if the Ukrainians had been ready in this area for an offensive, which they're not, they would have been able to exploit those openings and create breakthroughs, which could have caused drastic issues for the town of Vuhledar and the ongoing battle there, especially for the Russian side. Moving on to our next clip, we also saw that the Ukrainians were able to capture a T-72B3 today. We can see the Ukrainian soldier right here with a very herbal cigarette and some sunglasses, and we can also see the T-72B3 back there. Very nice. Very nice to know that they were able to capture another one of these things. And you can also see how wrecked the battlefield looks. It once again looks like the Somme, much like Bakhmut does. Also, we've reached $2,000. And I think everyone
on Super Bowl night?
On Super Bowl night. And I think everyone, real quick, who's supporting that fundraiser, I know that we can't read off y'all's names due to the glitch that's going on with YouTube's end, but I still thank each and every one of y'all because y'all are doing y'all's service as the Leaf Spring Army. And while we can't recognize y'all's names, y'all's impact on this war and saving the children of Ukraine through Save the Children will be known for all time. So I gotta thank every single one of y'all for helping to support this fundraiser, although we can't even know who any of y'all are, except for PsyOps. We know that PsyOps donated. Beyond that, we haven't seen
Mark says, I just donated $175,000.
Well,
I don't even think the limit goes that high.
Well, I mean, we haven't seen it yet, but we'll wait. So with that, we're now moving on from that little bit of news and on into the next one, where we saw the Russians mine the gap. It appears that the Russians tried to move through an open gap in the Ukrainian lines, and, well, it looks like the Ukrainians mined the gap. I hope you get the pun. When you see the Russian tank moving along, when you see it puffing and smoking like some kind of a chain smoker, and it appears that it has met its unfortunate demise, much like someone who smokes a little too much. It's okay to have a toke here and there, but you can't smoke like these guys. That tank is already up in flames. The second one comes along, and Matthew, would you know it? Would you know it? It drives right by where the other one got blown up.
That doesn't seem very smart.
No.
How about taking a different path? Oh, right at the same spot.
Oh, good lord! Oh my gosh!
That's something. What was that? That's not the turret.
That was a road wheel. So now that thing goes flying into the tree line. And that's it. I guess you could say it was a 2-tank pileup. And I gotta tell you, Matthew, I've never seen a pileup like that in my life. That is probably one of the most expensive pileups, and also probably one of the most explosive pileups as well. But very nice to see, and it's great to know that the Ukrainians were able to get one over on some Russian tanks again in the Vuhledar area, hitting them with some mines. We're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on into our next bit, where we saw some Russian soldiers walking amongst their own destroyed vehicles, giving you an idea of how badly the 155th Marine Infantry Brigade has been destroyed before it routed off the field today.
А это наша техника разбита. Идем на дачу Угледара. Все распиздячено от посадки. Хуй пойми что, он башня от танка, а вот сам танчик. Вот там в поле, он, видите, возле ворот тело какое-то лежит. Вот еще один там.
Just look at that.
Ну, и
The
дальше
losses.
то же самое.
They're
Это
good.
все, что от посадки осталось. Вот так и живем. А по телеку у нас, как всегда, все хорошо. Мы лучше. Все, мы любим вас.
That's the end of that clip. But I gotta tell y'all, that was some losses right there. I don't think we've ever seen those before, even from drone footage. So those may be some losses that we were never able to account for. And the Russians are even showing how badly their units are being destroyed in the area. Although, in their end, this is not doing them any good. It's showing that the Russians are getting whipped pretty much by the Ukrainians, and there's really nothing they're able to do about it. We're now moving on, though, from this little clip. And we're now moving on into the next one. Our last one from Vuhledar. Well, actually, I believe we've covered them all. Believe it or not, Matthew, can you believe it? We've covered them all.
That's very early.
That's very early. So let's talk about the front line situation and what we're seeing in this area. Of course, this front line has not changed at all over multiple days. You can see that right here, going all the way back to the 30th of January and going all the way up to the present day. It appears that the Russians were only able to chip away at this little corner of the field over here that really has nothing to do with the ongoing battle of Vuhledar. And over 12 days, no ground has been made. Hundreds, well, not hundreds, probably dozens or over 100 tanks have been lost. Several hundred, I believe, APCs have been destroyed. And then also, on top of that, thousands of infantry have also been wiped out here as well, practically depleting the 155th Brigade of all of its forces and forcing them to rout off the field and be replaced by a Mobic unit that will not be able to pursue the offensive even as badly as the 155th was. So we're seeing that the Battle of Vuhledar may start to die down again, but we're not really sure for certain. Also, we have to consider that the weather elements here have not really been in Russia's advantage either, and once again, poor planning and command has come into those decisions. It's been snowing, but it hasn't been snowing enough in Vuhledar and not cold enough for it to become permafrost and icy ground. Everything in the southern front right now is this snowy or muddy slush that has never solidified, so using armored advances in this area is incredibly difficult. And the Russians decided to fight in an area that needs armor to even function in the worst weather inclements for armor. Once again, the Russians are out there and showing us that you don't have to be the sharpest tool in the shed to lose a war, and the Russians are certainly losing this one, as we see right now, and specifically this battle, to an unbelievable margin. We're now going to be moving on from the Vuhledar area and on into the rest of our news, because we've been seeing some things tonight, a lot more things than just Vuhledar. We've been seeing the Battle of Bakhmut continue on. We've been seeing a decent amount of activity pick up in the northeast, and not only that, in the southern front, by and large as well. And we're starting to see that the war is starting to once again fan out into every single part of the front line, and the Ukrainians, in every single part of it, are giving the Russians a good, I guess you could say, a nice, proper, how do we call it, man?
They're giving them hell. They're giving them hell.
No. I think I'm looking for a better wordage. An ass thwacking. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. They're doing that quite well. Speaking of thwacking, we saw that the Polish were sending more T-72s to help the Ukrainians thwack those Russians quite, I guess you say, dubiously. So let's watch this video. You see one T-72. It looks to be a T-72A, so not the best thing out there, but considering what the Russians are currently using, believe it or not, it's on par. So we're going to let it continue. And you see a second T-72A. A third T-72A. A fourth one. A fifth one. A sixth one. A seventh one. An eighth one. And a ninth one further back. That one's lagging behind a little bit. van, signaling the end of that convoy. 9, if I got that number correct, 9 T-72As on their way to Ukraine. And the Ukrainians are already trained on these vehicles, so it's just a matter of implementing them into the units that they need to be in, and those units will be operational practically immediately. It will not require any training like the Leopards, so that's 9 tanks that the Ukrainians just got bolstered with today, which is a considerable number, especially considering the lack of armor that we're starting to see the Russians use in most area of the lines, except for Vuhledar, which has been the exception. We're now going to be moving on from this a little bit, and we've seen that we've gotten up to $2.3 thousand. And once again, we can't see any of y'all's names, but still, I thank the entirety of the Lee Spring Army, not just as individuals, but as a group, for getting that fundraiser to where it is. We've almost reached the halfway point of this fundraiser. And, you know, I'm wondering, Matthew, should we do something really interesting and probably historic tonight? Because this glitch is not going to last forever. If this is the only time we've ever seen it, I'm sure that by the time we run another fundraiser next week, this will be gone. Should we declare a general order to get this fundraiser on up to the top? Because tonight it's not really about recognizing individual donors. It's more so, I guess, about what the entirety of the Lee Spring Army can do as a collective unit, as the army itself. Faceless service, selfless service to the calls that we report on and the war in Ukraine in general. So, you know what? That's what we're going to do, Matthew. At this moment, and I'll throw in mine, and y'all should be able to see mine. It'll probably come in as anonymous like it did the first time. But if y'all have $5 to give, put it in right now. My name will actually pop up on this one. YouTube will allow me that this time. Thank you, YouTube overlords. It's General Order number 11. Where if you have $5 to throw it in right now, and we're going to blow this thing out of the park. Right here, right now to 5K. So I'm throwing in my $20 right now. Hopefully
Dang, somebody's threw in a massive amount. We're up to 2.9 thousand.
Like I just saw that. It's like way up there. So hopefully there's mine. So y'all can see mine there. Finally, that's like the third one that's popped up. And if you have $5, throw it in right now. And let's keep throwing it in until we reach 5K. And then by the time we reach that, we'll call it a night. Because I don't want to raise the goals and keep it running too much. But 5K is the goal. Let's get to it, and let's get this thing done with. And so, we've already reached 3.1.
You know what? It seems like it's just showing moderators and the channel owners' donations, but Psyops is a mod. Yours popped up, and that's the only ones that have popped up for the night. It seems like there might be some kind of new setting or something that's misplaced or something.
Let me go and check out the giving page, and let me go to this current fundraiser we have. Because that is really bizarre, and I don't really know how to explain why that's doing that. So, let me go to set a goal. So, YouTube covers trains. Okay, yeah, we know about that.
Wow, 3.6 thousand. Oh,
3.6?
Yep, 3.6.
Holy
It's jumping around like crazy.
Who in the world threw that in?
Somebody.
We don't know. Somebody is carrying the Lee Spring Army tonight. We don't know who you are, but thank you. 3.7. There's no setting, though. I'm looking around. There's no setting to change that in. Huh.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's wild. But somebody's going crazy. It's jumping around from 3.7 to 3.8, 3.5, 3.8, 3.7, 3.8. My God, what is going on?
Well, I have to tell you, Jimmy, it's quite the race right here. But anyways, we're gonna keep on with the news while the Lee Spring Army does its job and gets us on up to 5K, so that way we can reach the fundraiser goal for the night. And also, I gotta tell you, the Super Bowl is going on right now, but the people who really won the Super Bowl is the Lee Spring Army. We're not even a competing team. But if we're able to reach a 5K goal on Super Bowl night, and also with YouTube practically working against us and not even letting us see who the donors are, I think that's going to be unbelievably impressive.
Dang, 4,000.
Hey, 4,000!
Hey,
We are just 1,000 away!
69.
Man! And also, sorry everyone, once again, to reiterate this, we cannot see donors tonight. This is the weirdest thing, because there's not even a setting in the YouTube Give platform to enable that or disable that. But oddly enough, we can't. So I'm sorry about that, everyone. But the Lee Spring Army is blowing this thing away. We're up to 4.1K. And we're making our way on up to 5,000. We're only $900 away from 5,000. And we're only 37 minutes into the stream.
Nice.
So we're gonna keep this. We're gonna keep this news running in the meantime. But if we reach 5K, I'm going to flip. So we're now moving on from Poland and on into our location unknowns. And we have some very interesting ones today. And once again, the Russian losses have been quite spicy. Very, very spicy today. And getting on up there towards the bloodiest days again. But before we get into all of this location unknown news, there are some polls we have to cover. Some very, very interesting polls. So, Matthew, what do we got?
Wow, and we're going into the poll segment very, very soon tonight, and we have 3 to address. And the very first one says a fourth unidentified object.
Holy moly! We just got a $500 donation. Went from 4.2 to 4.7.
Nice, and we're up to 4.7 thousand.
We're just $300 away, less than $300 away, most likely. Whoever did that,
I feel so blindsided not being able to know who did it.
yeah, like we're just watching this thing explode, and we're like, who the hell is doing this? And then I look at viewer activity, and it tells me nothing, like nothing at all. This is just
4.8.
4.8. 4.8. So let's hear that first poll though, because I'm sorry I interrupted you there.
All right, so it says a fourth unidentified object was shot down over Lake Huron by the U.S. military, and what are your thoughts? 68% said it must be China or Russia still. 24% said unsure, and 8% said maybe an aircraft of foreign origin.
Hey, we did it! We did it! We reached $5,000. $5,000 for Save the Children. And we can't even see who donated. And that's unbelievable. That really, I have to say, Matthew, this is the night that has proven what the Lee Spring Army is. We can't even recognize the names of the people who have been able to help out this fundraiser tonight. Yet everyone has still chipped in and helped this fundraiser to reach the goal in record time, in under 38 minutes. Absolutely unbelievable. And I've got to thank every single one of y'all in the Lee Spring Army for who y'all are and what we've turned this into. This is definitely a group to be proud of, because even without us being able to recognize people's names, they've done something entirely selfless and gotten this up to $5,000. And I got
you know what's wild? It's tonight's Super Bowl night. We can't see the donors, and tonight is a record, the fastest we've ever reached goal in the history of the channel. I just looked up at the time, and it is the soonest we've ever done it.
Unbelievable. Absolutely insane.
Of all nights, tonight, it's absolutely insane.
That is insane. That's unbelievable. And we've just got up to 5.2. It's still going. It's up to 5.3.
Dang.
Man, that's why the LSA is the best there is in the entire internet. There's nothing in the entire world. There is nothing better than the Lee Spring Army. And so with that, let's finally get onto that poll, because I've interrupted you every single time. So let's hear that first poll one more time.
All right, so starting from the top on this first poll, a fourth unidentified object was shot down over Lake Huron by U.S. military, and what are your thoughts? 68% said it must be China or Russia, 24% said unsure, and 8% said maybe an aircraft of foreign origin. At this point, with such little information, I'm going to go with unsure and undecided. We are being kept in the dark remarkably heavily by the U.S. military, and it would be nice to have some more information. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I say that I would also have to agree with Matthew. We're not being provided enough information on our level to be able to say anything definitively about that. So we're going to have to withhold judgment until we can eventually get enough news or information about these objects to report on them. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. And also, BG asked a question, and this is actually a fairly good question tonight, especially considering the glitch we have. BG said, where do the donations go specifically? What is the name of the charity? Thanks. I'll give you all the rundown of how it works, and considering that tonight it's not showing anyone's names on the donations, it's a fairly good point to bring up. So here's my stream, as y'all will see it. So we have streamception going on here. It's about to get crazy. But you can see the fundraiser up here. And right down here, BG, at the bottom right corner of the screen, if you're on the desktop, it'll show you the fundraiser, the total amount, the exact amount, which is $5,381 right now. It'll show you how many hours are left before this fundraiser closes. And it also tells you to where this goes. You can click Show More, and it gives my explanation of what Save the Children is and why we're running the fundraiser. And it also tells you what Save the Children says about themselves. It also says right here that YouTube covers all transaction fees. So if you send in $5, $5 will go to Ukraine exactly. YouTube doesn't deduct anything out of that to, I guess you could say, pay for people to cover the, I guess you could say, finances of this fundraiser. So that's where it goes. It goes directly to Save the Children. You can see that right there. You can see that YouTube covers all transaction fees, and it's all done pretty much by third party. While I'm running the fundraiser and created the fundraiser, YouTube does everything in the background, managing all of the support and donations that come into the fundraiser, and also getting it to Save the Children. So it is a great way to run fundraisers. Honestly, it's the only way we'll ever run a fundraiser because it's so foolproof. But I wanted to make sure to explain that because that was a great point tonight, BG, especially considering the odd glitch that we've run into. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. And if y'all ever wonder what the fundraiser is doing and you're on a desktop, just go to the bottom right of the screen and y'all should be able to see everything you want to know about that fundraiser. And I also throw in the description right here in the what is it called? The description of the video. So you can also read that right there as well. We try and make this as straightforward as possible. So with that, I hope that addresses that question fairly well. And that actually, I guess, got us into the question segment a little early. So I hope we addressed that poll and that question. Let's get on to our another poll.
All right. So our second poll says Ukraine says on Western hesitance to send fighter jets. That's exactly what we heard about the tanks. So what are your thoughts about Ukraine's statement about Western hesitancy? It looks like 70% said it's very similar to the tank situation, like Ukraine said. 8% said unsure. 18% said jets are completely different. And 4% said no, it's not similar. And on this one, I've got to say that I think it is pretty similar to the tank situation, but slightly different. But I will go with the majority on this one. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I think I'm also going to have to go with the majority on this one as well because it's slightly similar to a tank, but not quite. So with that, I hope I addressed that poll fairly well. And let's get on to the next one because this next one, Matthew, this one's really out there if I'm looking at the one that's live right now.
Oh, we actually have a different one. It says, are you satisfied with the conclusion of the Super Bowl? A question that some people were very, very upset about. It looks like 47% said unsure, none of the above. 36% said yes, and 17% said no. For me, I'm going to be completely honest. I really don't like football. I don't follow it. Nothing wrong with it, but not my thing. So, Enforcer, what do you say?
Well, obviously I don't follow the Super Bowl, otherwise we wouldn't be running this stream tonight, and it appears that the Kansas City Chiefs won the Super Bowl. Sadly, man, way to put, Fly Eagles Fly is probably not even here tonight. He's probably crying because the Philadelphia...
I think he is here.
Is he? Let us know.
I think so.
Let us know if you are Fly Eagles Fly, and if you are, I hate to see that the Philadelphia Eagles lost. We were vested entirely on the Philadelphia Eagles, really because you're the only person I know of that is a huge football fan here in the stream, and you were a huge fan of the Philadelphia Eagles. I hate to see that they lost, but it was very close. They gave, apparently, the Kansas City Chiefs a hell of a run, only being about 3 points off, which seems like it is a just a field goal away. So, and then again, I don't really know a lot about football scoring, so I don't know how many points a field goal really is. I think it's like 1 or 2 points. But moving on from that, I don't really watch the Super Bowls or football at all to really be able to comment on that a bit. So with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well. And we are on to the last one, I believe.
All right, and the last one is slightly out there, but it's a question that a lot of people have been asking, so we had to poll it. The question is, would it be realistic to rule out the possibility of the objects being of extraterrestrial origin? It looks like 58% said yes, it would be realistic to rule it out. 32% said no, and 10% said unsure. So it's almost half and half between the no's and unsures and the yeses. On this one, I'm going to be completely honest. It would be a real stretch to think it was extraterrestrial. It's most likely some kind of technology from China or Russia that we are unfamiliar with, or it might even be from the United States. We're just being kept in the dark so badly, it's hard to say what's going on. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm going to have to be honest, I've completely ruled out for the large part, rather than just the idea of saying a what-if question, that it is extraterrestrial in origin. Here's the reason why. Well, a couple of reasons why. One, if it was extraterrestrial, we're saying, and keep this in mind, we're saying that it takes a vast amount of energy for us to even send something into low Earth orbit. And that's something that is a huge accomplishment whenever it's done here on Earth. And that takes amounts of energy that we can't even possibly comprehend from these rockets that we're sending up. And we're saying that a civilization that has to at least be hundreds of light years away, if not thousands of light years away, was able to develop a craft that could travel fast enough that we were supposing the one generation that started off piloting the ship made it here, came down into our atmosphere, and having that ability and being able to exude that kind of power from a single vessel and have that technological capability to travel all the way here was somehow shot down by an F-22 with an AIM-9X. That one story right there would make that a little too implausible for me to say that it's extraterrestrial. The other thing is that now they've shot down about 3 of these unidentified flying objects, one over Alaska, one over Yukon, and one over the Lake Huron. With those 3 of them being shot down, don't we think that if they were extraterrestrial, they would have started becoming hostile against us after the first one was shot down, or the second one? Why in the world would we be able to shoot down 3 of them and nothing would have happened yet? So those are my 2 reasons. Just, you know, and I'm making those reasons, not trying to say that extraterrestrial life is completely impossible. It may be out there and we just don't know of it because it's so far away. But the concept of it coming here and that being what it is, which is a UFO from an extraterrestrial place, and we're able to do these things and these kinds of parameters exist around it, appear to be illogical. So I would make the assumption based off of those clear logical indicators that it is certainly not anything extraterrestrial. It's something from another country here on our own planet. Then it becomes the question of who it is. And I would have to say, and this seems fairly odd, Matthew and me have actually discussed this before, it would have to be the Russians, because the Russians are the only one. If you notice the path of all of these objects, they're all coming in over Alaska, or they're coming in over the northwestern area of North America and making their way further on through Canada and down towards the east coast of the United States. That appears, in my opinion, to be something that would have had to have been launched over the Arctic Circle, either from Russia or from China. And remember, the world's a globe. It's not a flat map, so it's a lot easier to fly upwards and over like that instead of a straight line. That's actually a longer distance. So it would either be the Russians flying over the Arctic Circle, or it'd be the Chinese, and due to the jet streams and wind currents, it sends it up over the coastline of Russia, then on into Alaska, and then on into the rest of North America. So I hope that addresses that fairly well. It's either the Russians or the Chinese. That's really going to be...
It's between the two. I would put my money on China, because Russia doesn't seem capable. Like, for example, their cosmonauts are stuck in space right now, and they really can't get them down. So if they had such capabilities, why wouldn't they be able to solve problems that are more pressing?
That's a good question, and you know, but then again, we've got to remember sometimes countries do things illogical. Like, for example, with Nazi Germany losing the Second World War, they would start to field the first combat jet aircraft that was actually used in the war against other aircraft, which was the Me-262. No other fighter jet that was made in the Second World War, like the Gloucester Meteor or the P-80 Shooting Star, would be used by either the United States or Britain in actual combat. They would be used at home bases, either in the United Kingdom to take down V-1 Doodlebugs, or in the United States just for training and further developing the concept of a jet fighter. Not only that, the Germans also started to use V-2 rockets, and both the Me-262 and the V-2 were exorbitant wastes of vital resources that the Germans could have put towards their own war effort in trying to defend their country, but instead they put them towards these. And so I'm not really putting it out of the question that these could be Russian. It could be that due to the inefficiency and incompetence of the Russians, they've put a lot of their effort and resources into producing flying objects that are flying over the Arctic Circle and here into North America, and we just don't really know about it yet. If that is the case, I guess we'll find out here soon. But then again, considering that all of this was preceded by the Chinese balloon flying over the United States, that once again leads us more so into the camp, logically, these would most likely be Chinese, considering that they're following right behind the original Chinese balloon that was shot down. So with that, I hope that addresses that part fairly well. That's what I'm thinking, but do you have anything to add to that, Matthew?
Back to the original question, I'd have to say, logically speaking, if we're being like totally, unbiased, I don't think you can rule out anything at this point. concerning the lack of information, even though, speaking about aliens always delves kind of like into the realm of conspiracy theories, and it's kind of gained a bad reputation. Anything's possible, but I would say it's unlikely, and I'm personally not putting my my money in that spot. But I think that's all I got to say about it. It's just kind of like questionable with the lack of information.
I'm going to have to say I doubt UFOs because once again going off of the logical indicators before, it wouldn't make any sense if another species on another planet was capable of doing something like that. How would we be able to so easily shoot down 3 of them?
I don't know. Maybe they're not used to hostile people.
Well, I mean,
I'm being sarcastic, by the way.
Well, I thought you were being serious there. I was maybe like, well, I mean, that wouldn't make much sense. But yeah, I don't know. I'm going to roll out the whole extraterrestrial thing pretty much entirely, in my opinion, something from another country. And I guess as time goes by, we're going to figure out what it is. But right now, it appears that the answers are about as sparse as possible. I'll be driving to Washington, D.C. to the White House tomorrow to see if I can get an appointment and try and figure out what this is. I'll sort this all out for y'all. Watch me actually do that and then get in there and get an answer or something.
That would be something, wouldn't it?
That would be hilarious.
But seriously speaking, though, like all the ET talk aside, it's kind of concerning that, for example, this object that was just shot down over Lake Huron was first detected allegedly over Montana. Then we lost track of it. Then we later found it and shot it down after it traversed a pretty good section of the country. So I'm not exactly sure why we weren't able to keep track of it, but it sounds like we have some work to do with our detection systems.
And also, one other thing, the Chinese also said that they spotted some kind of a flying object, an unidentified flying object near the Shandong province of China, somewhere around, I believe it's Qingdao, if I pronounced that correctly, and they were planning to shoot that down earlier today. And what we may be seeing, and this is a huge hypothesis, so take this with the biggest grain of salt you can, it could have been that most world governments were allowing these balloon drone things, whatever they are, to fly around the world, and everyone was launching them, everyone was using them, and there was just kind of a unwritten and unagreed treaty amongst most countries that these things could fly over and no one would really say anything about them and no one would really do anything about them unless they started to interfere with national airspace. And it appears that because all of these sightings and all of these potential shoot downs are now occurring after the Chinese one at Myrtle Beach, it may be that now no one really has a reason to follow this unwritten agreement, and everyone's just starting to shoot down these surveillance balloons from everyone, everywhere, because they're all over the place. I don't really know. Because that's something to bring in. And then also, they say that there's one in South America, and they don't know where it comes from. They don't know if it's Chinese or what. And I believe the Ukrainians, Matthew told me this, I don't really know if this is true, the Ukrainians also spotted one over their country today, and were attempting to shoot it down, although we don't know the success of that mission. So that could
According
be...
to the Kyiv Independent, I believe they actually shot it down, and they said it had some kind of deflectors at 4 corners of the balloon that reflect radar signals.
I wonder. I wonder what's going on here at the end of it all, because I'm sitting here listening to that again, because we've talked this over well before the stream. I don't even know. We're going to have to declare ignorance on this one, but there's not enough information coming out. We're just trying to take shots in the dark. We don't really know what it is. Anyone's guess is the best guess right now. So we'll wait until more news comes out, but that's what we're looking at right now. And I hope we hash that out fairly well, so that we're now going to be moving on, I believe, from our polls, because I believe we just covered the last one, and on into our questions. We're going to answer 3 questions from the live chat, and then we're going to get right back into the news while our fundraiser has reached $5.8 thousand, $800 over goal, and we can't even recognize any individual person for helping us to get there. All we can do is once again thank the entirety of the Lee Spring Army for doing their duty and doing their job. This is what the Lee Spring Army is all about at the end of the day, and y'all are proving that whether individuals get recognized or not, the Lee Spring Army as an actual army is a force to be reckoned with on YouTube. So with that, let's get on into the questions.
All right, and up first, we have our Morse code decoders of the stream, JP's RCs, Paul Scholes, and Mark Hodges. They said the Morse code tonight says, here lies the 155th. The Ukrainians laid them out. Slava LSA, Slava Ukraine, and Igor.
And y'all got it correct. Here lies the 155th. The Ukrainians laid them out. I was actually going to say in that Morse code message, the 155th laid to rest in peace. But then I was like, nah, they weren't laid to rest. The Ukrainians laid them out. So y'all did get the Morse code message correct, and thank y'all for doing that again. Y'all didn't get it last night. But however, I thank y'all for getting it tonight. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank y'all for deciphering the Morse code message.
All right. So our second question goes to Dakota the Bear, who says, "You think it's Russia with balloons that they bought from China, perhaps?"
I don't know. I would say that's about as good as a guess as any. I would believe that would be as plausible a hypothesis as any other right now. So I would say, yeah, that's a fairly good shot at it. You know, it's everyone's taking shots in the dark right now, so that's about as good as anyone else's guess. So I hope that addresses that fairly well. And we are on, if I'm correct, Matthew, I think we are on to our final question of the segment, and then we're getting right into the news again.
Yes, and the last one of the first segment goes to Keith Does Things, who says U.S. Navy attacked Nord Stream pipeline. Says Pulitzer-winning journalist Seymour Hersh. What are your thoughts, and can you confirm?
Seymour Hersh. Here we go. Let's read about him, and let's see who he is. He's 85 years old. All right, so he's kind of in the area of Henry Kissinger. Okay, so... okay, I gotta say this. This guy sounds a little bit like right here, like a nut job, but I'll explain why. The death of Osama bin Laden is something that has been confirmed time and time again because they took pictures of him dead, you know, and I believe there was actually one picture of one of the SEALs actually holding, you know, Osama's dead body and then putting a thumbs up right beside him, you know, and if that was a government thing, they wouldn't have tried to make it look like that, but that guy did, so, you know, there's that. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense to say that we were lying about killing Osama bin Laden, because if we were, where is he? He's never reappeared, and, you know, if he was still alive, he would say, I'm not dead, because that's what people do. And then also he said that Bashar al-Assad never used chemical weapons on the civilians in the Syrian civil war, and that's also a straight-up lie, because we had to go over there and help people who had gotten chemical burns and other sorts of things from that poison gas that had been dropped on them by al-Assad's regime. So this guy sounds like he's full of it, and he's more of a pundit, if anything. So I wouldn't really count on him and his comments to really amount to much of anything, considering he seems to be unhinged. Like right here. Hersh wrote that that administration had plans for an airstrike on Iran. Of particular note, in his article, that was a U.S. nuclear first strike, where we would just nuke the Iranians off the bat, was being considered to eliminate underground uranium enrichment facilities. Does anyone, like, I don't know why people put so much credit into these guys right here, because look at that stupid comment. Does that even stand up to logic? No. Why the hell would you just nuke someone off the bat? That's a weapon of last resort. It's been clearly laid out. That's been the precedent for 70 years. A weapon of last resort. That's why we've never seen it used. And this goofball is going to sit here in 2006 and go, we're just going to nuke the Iranians out of the blue for the hell of it sometime round. Like, this guy may as well be as credible as Sky News or the Hindustan Times for all I care. And I don't know why people have been putting so much credit into people like Seymour Hersh and Henry Kissinger for so long, when comments like these make no sense when you stand them up against the rest of history and what is logical. Like, you know,
what do you win a Pulitzer Prize for? Like the best fiction novel or something?
Yeah, I guess he's on up there with that guy who wrote War of the Worlds. But let's see here. Let's see where the award is. Awards Honors Association. So, let's see. Pulitzer Prize for International Reporting. You've got to be kidding me. Like, making comments and statements like that in 2006. And this guy's going to
maybe back in 1970 he was somewhat more reputable.
It looks like he may have gotten that actually for his reports on My Lai, and that seems to be his only saving grace, is that he talked about the My Lai massacre when it occurred in Vietnam, and he got that correct. But then from there on, it appears that he was just shooting in the dark at everything, especially the Iran thing. That makes no sense. Let's see. The Soviet Union was due to a combination. And that largely isn't true either, because Korean Air Flight 007 was shot down over the Sakhalin Islands because it had accidentally veered off course due to a misinput, and no U.S. spy aircraft, from what we knew while they flew very close to the Sakhalin Island, ever flew over the Sakhalin Island. So that would be more so entirely on Soviet incompetence, and not the U.S. intelligence operations intended to confuse Soviet responses.
And also, the person who asked the question, Keith Dusling, said, to be clear, I did not say I agree with him. I'm not a kook. Also, Keith, I just want to be clear as well. I wasn't like, bashing you for the question or anything. I'm simply taking the issue with what this individual here is putting out.
And I want to make that clear to you too, Keith Dusling. Well, I'm not bashing you at all, but like the comment, like this guy right here. What I'm trying to say is I don't like this guy, and what he's saying doesn't make any sense, especially this here and Osama bin Laden and the Syrian civil war, and none of this makes sense. Like this right here. I don't necessarily buy the story that bin Laden was responsible for 9/11. He was the leader of Al-Qaeda, and Al-Qaeda publicly stated that they were responsible for 9/11. That's saying, the U.S. said they're responsible for the attacks on mainland China, but I don't really think that they're responsible for the attacks on mainland China. That makes no sense. They admitted to it. They literally stepped up and said, I'm guilty. Guilty as charged. I did it. Now he's going to sit there and go, I don't know if they really were. And yeah, anyways, I hope that addresses the question. And Keith does things. I want to make it clear. I'm not at all taking a shot at you. I'm taking a shot at this guy. And thank you for bringing this guy up, because if anyone ever says that this guy is a source to be believed, he doesn't make any sense on any of his arguments. They don't have any precedent in reality. But with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you, by the way, for bringing it up, Keith Does Things, because that allowed me a moment to look at something and just get kind of baffled by it. And with that, we are going to be moving on into the next bit of news here in the northeast of the war in Ukraine. And so moving on to Deep State UA and going over the past 24 hours here, I'm sure you'll be shocked. Nothing's happened. Can you believe it? Also, by the way, we never got into the location unknown, so we have to get into those real quick, actually. So, starting off before we get to the northeast.
Also, we had 6.8 thousand.
What? 6.8 thousand?
Spencer's here, Mark is here, a lot of top donors are here, so who knows who did it. I haven't seen anybody take credit for it yet, but somebody threw in a massive amount.
Holy moly, dude. I don't even know how big that is, but thank you to whoever threw that in. You are helping the Lee Spring Army to get all the way up to $7,000, and we can't even see who's donating to the fundraiser.
Oh, Spencer put in a $750, so I think he might have been the top donor there on that one.
Hey, let's go, Spencer! Let's go. I can't believe that. And thank you so much for doing that, Spencer. Also, Spencer, to explain this, because I don't think you were here for this earlier, we can't see anyone's donations tonight. It doesn't mean that you're, banned or anything. We just don't know why. No one's donations are showing up except for channel owners and moderators like Psyops and me. No one else's is showing up, rather than that. We have no idea why, because there's no setting to change that. So sorry about that.
Also, Trister1 put a $500 and also another $500 in as well. So Trister also contributed to that humongous raise in the amount.
And thank you, Trister, as well. Man, everyone's killing it tonight. We can't even thank y'all individually, but once again, thank you to the entirety of the LSA for doing the impossible, especially on Super Bowl night, where Matthew was telling me before the stream, we should set the goal really low because I don't think we're going to make it. And we blew it out of the water, even at a normal goal. Unbelievable. It's actually blowing me away, Matthew, because I was really nervous too, while we put it at a normal goal that we weren't going to make it. And we made it over the top. Unbelievable.
It's crazy. It's a record amount, I think. I know it was the fastest we've ever reached a goal, because it was 9:35 when we reached it our time, and it's only 10:06 now. We're at almost 7,000. That's pretty fast.
That is fast. That is fast. And so with that, let's move on into this phone call, because it sounds like the Ukrainian, the Russian soldiers are saying that February is going to be a decisive month. Interestingly enough, almost half of the month has already passed. So let's watch the phone call. And also, I'm going to mute it. I will actually play it really quietly and, read it off. So I'll try a better effeminate voice tonight. Speak! So basically, we won't see each other soon. Why? Basically, it's bad here. They force you to sign a contract. Some do, some don't. And regarding the mobilized, they said that in 6 months, or maybe even 12 months, someone will be allowed on leave. Maybe. But otherwise, until the end of the special operation. There must be a leave, honey! No, not for the mobilized. They don't even want to let contractors go. Vova said he wants to call up a large number. That is, increase the size of the army, and it's already happening, блядь. I don't know. The guys came here today and asked this question. Does anyone want to sign a contract? I don't know. My head hurts so bad. My head hurts from these news. There's nothing to count on anymore, except for Levi's blue jeans. Do you want me to tell you the truth? The outcome is the same, or rather two of them. Two ways. One way is the casket. Another is that at the end of the war, when it all ends. Maybe I'll return. I don't know when it's going to end. Lads are saying February will be a decisive month, as all armies are being pulled up. Our forces, new vehicles brought in. The slur brought up vehicles everywhere, and perhaps it'll be a decisive month. Either we'll win over everyone, or we shit ourselves and the war will go on. I'm going with the latter. As we can see right there, the phone call is showing that this guy thinks that it's going to be a decisive month. Either the Russians will get crapped on or they'll win. And I think they'll get crapped on because if we've seen anything over this war, whenever they're supposed to steamroll the Ukrainians and win, they always end up losing. So don't get your hopes up, just in case we have any Russian bots in here tonight. You aren't going to win. Look, you aren't going to win yet. Do a push-up, fatty. So with that, we're now moving on from that little bit of location unknown news and on into our next bit, where we saw the Ukrainians capture the T-90A today. And look at that. That is a T-90A right there in the flesh. They got it. With that, that's the end of the clip. It's super nice to see that they were able to capture this T-90 intact, and hopefully they'll be able to use it against the Russians here in the near future. We're now moving on from that clip and on into our next one, where we also saw a Ukrainian drone dropping grenades onto the Russians, as our fundraiser reaches $7.4 thousand. We don't even know who's doing it. We don't even know who's doing that, but I still thank y'all for helping to get that fundraiser well beyond the $5,000 goal. We're moving faster tonight than we normally do, and that's crazy. So, here's the clip. We're watching this bomblet. It's dropping, and we see two Russians near that house. But you see the bomblet explode, and one Russian falls over, and he has a nap. The second one, he falls over a little bit more slowly, and he decides to take a nap gently. The difference is big. So with that, that's the end of the clip, and we've reached 8K! Let's go!
Jaga! Igor!
Man, wild! And thank you, LSA, once again. We're now going to be moving on from this clip and on into our next one, where we also saw the Russian casualty report for today, and it's pretty high. Another 900 Russian soldiers were blown away today. Another 14 armored personnel carriers were destroyed today. Another 14 supply trucks. 13 tanks, 17 artillery pieces, 10 drones, 2 MLRSs, a plane, and 1 Bobcat skid steer.
Only one?
Only one, but still.
One fake Bobcat goes to the grave, goes to Bobcat hell.
One Bobcat. You know, Matthew, whenever the Ukrainians see those fake Bobcats, they always sit there with that drone-guided bomblet and go, call them out, and then they drop it right onto it. But still, very impressive to see the number of vehicular losses that occurred today, as these are some of the highest numbers we've seen recently in every single category, and this is the highest loss day in terms of vehicles combined. The losses have never gotten this high before, at least over the past few months, in every single category at the same time. So the Russians are certainly losing a lot of precious vehicles. In fact, you can see that the number of tanks has been moved all the way up to nearly 3,300, which would have been around the ballpark of what we thought their pre-war operational tank numbers would have been on the low end. So that means that they're running out of tanks at this moment, and they're most likely having to pull out reserves out of the Nether and the Far East and get them operational to be used in this war. And so with that, that's the losses for the day, and of course, nice to see. Moving on into our final clip, we also saw a Ukrainian quick reaction to a little bit of fighting going on. So, here's the clip. And, I think that's a song. Yeah, that's a song. We're muting it. When you see the Ukrainians moving around, firing at the Russians in the distance, you see a lot of them wearing winter camouflage, which is very nice. We can see this guy here is firing a PKP, it appears, as he has a box magazine. And we can see a BMP further down the road. A Russian BMP, as a matter of fact, burning and smoking. Hey, is someone cooking ribs? Because it's smelling like it around here. Oh, no, that's a Russian, Blia. Oh. When you see them still firing at the Russians as they continue to advance beyond the destroyed BMP, and we can see the pillar of smoke rising in the distance as they move well on beyond the BMP and on into the Russian lines. Very nice to see, and hopefully they can keep it up. We're now moving on. Come on, man, to the out of the location unknowns and on into the northeastern area where we were just a second ago before I forgot that we hadn't covered the location unknowns. So, of course, no frontline activity is occurring in this area, and now it's time to get into the video clips, starting off near the area of Naval, where we saw a new Ukrainian surveillance drone being used. This thing looks pretty cool. And it's got a lot of antennas on it. We see him tossing it. And wow, that thing actually was very balanced. It took off very well. And now it's on its way.
Typically, when you like throw those RC planes off like that, they usually go like straight down to the ground.
They usually almost like nosedive, and you have to adjust it where it doesn't. They're doing a loop with it in air. Oh, man, these guys may as well be at the Farnborough Air Show with how they're flying this thing. And now it looks like it may be flying off into the distance or coming back. We don't really know. Actually, it looks like it may be coming back. And yeah, it's coming back. It's landing right now. And it landed out there in the field, and that's the end of the clip. And really crazy to see, and even crazier, we've gotten up to $8,600. How the hell is this happening tonight? We are raising more tonight than we do when the fundraisers run normally, and we can actually see everyone. This is crazy, and I've got to thank the entire Lee Spring Army again, not just an individual tonight, but the whole Lee Spring Army for making this possible. We don't know who's doing that out of all of y'all, but we know that it is someone from the Lee Spring Army. It is in the Lee Spring Army Old Guard or a Soldat, and either whether you be a Soldat or an Old Guard, I thank every single one of y'all for carrying the banner of the Lee Spring Army and helping us to get to heights that we never thought we would before. And so with that, we're now moving on.
Like Secret Santa around here or something.
Yeah, it's like Secret Santa. It's like Christmas around here. Come on, man.
Secret donors.
It's a secret donor. What happened? Reread the line. So with that, we're now going to be moving on from this little bit of news in the northeast and moving on towards the area of Svatove, where we saw the Ukrainians hit a Russian foxhole. Let's watch this happen. We're going to mute it because it's got some music. When you see the Russians down there in their foxhole, it appears that they're having a fun time. And oh my lord, Matthew, the Ukrainians put some English on a grenade. Have you ever seen this? Look at that. They put English on a grenade. Nuts. It's spiraling right in.
English.
What?
I didn't say any English. You mean like English writing?
No, like English, like spin. You know, like where it curves a little bit. You know?
Oh, okay.
Come on, man. Y'all gotta be some of the... But let's see here. Watch, look. See right there? You see it like right there on the grenade, Matthew. If you zoom into that little tile of it, you'll hear, "Oh, hello, Governor."
Oh.
And it goes
I don't get it.
spiraling, whatever. You can see it spiraling on into their little dugout covered in sticks. And, oh,
Oh, bruv, my leg. Oh, quick, bruv.
oh,
Come on,
brother.
fam, it's just a little ting. Just call out ting.
My leg, it's been buggered. Oh, brother. So now he's crawling out. And so with that,
Di gracia.
that's the end of the clip. And I gotta say, they got him pretty good, if y'all couldn't tell. It looks like only one of them was able to make it out. So with that, we're now moving on from that bit of news and further on down and into the area of Novomykilsky, where we saw some more Russian soldiers getting hit. You see the Russian soldiers running along to some rock music, and look at how their silhouettes are lined out so perfectly. And you know, this is kind of the thing with modern warfare. What's the point of camo anymore? When cameras are looking at you from the top down and they just see your shadow moving. You know, camo doesn't really break up your form anymore because your shadow is clearly seen. So, you know, and on top of that, you can see them clear as day without the shadow. They're now grouping up, and oh no! Oh! Yikes!
I think that caught him by surprise.
I think it did. You might just say that it was like a what was it? What was that song, Matthew? Like it was like wham bam smack on the head. You know the one I'm talking about? It's like from like the 50s.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I don't think Igor or Ivan or whoever his name is, I don't think he's getting up. It looks like a lot of them aren't getting up. It looks like they might be going on for the long nap. And that was a hole-in-one right there, if y'all have ever seen one. Call in Tiger Woods, because these are hitting the holes just on. So with that, we're now moving on from that little clip and on into the next bit, further on down near Ploshchanka, where we saw a Novator, which is an armored car that the Ukrainians are using, took a hit and kept on rocking. Kind of like a, well, I'm not going to say that joke, because every time I say jokes that are a little risque, Matthew's always going, dang, man, that's not PG, so we're just going to let that joke slide. And when you see the Novator armored car right here, and we can see near the front of it, it took a little hit, but it'll buff out. A little bit of armor roll, this thing will be resold just fine. Man, that was a hit right to the engine pretty much, and that thing took it like a champ, and everyone inside the car was fine. Because the guys who were inside the car are now outside of the car. So with that, that's the end of the clip, and pretty impressive to see nonetheless, and a real credit to the Novator armored car. We're now moving on out of this area of the front, and even further on down, and past the area of Kremena, past the area of Bielorivka and Verkhnyo-Kamyanka, and we're now moving all the way down into Bakhmut. Because y'all know, it's time. Cover that Bakhmut news, and interestingly enough, we only have 3 clips of news today, one from each part of the front. So let's get right into it, starting off with our frontline analysis on day 354. Let's see what we got. So over the past 24 hours, the Russians have been able to make incredibly small amounts of movement in these areas, and that's about it. Yeah, so not that big. It looks like they moved up a couple of fields. They've finally taken the entire ridgeline behind Vuhledar. So that is the thing, but it doesn't really look like they're making that much progress, especially when you zoom out. So yeah. Also, one other thing I noticed when we were zooming in is there's a Bielorivka right here, and this once again makes it confusing as hell to talk about anything in Ukraine, because there's Bielorivka, but then there's also Bielorivka right there, and they're literally within like 15 miles of each other. That must be so confusing to live in Ukraine. Like, oh, you know, just drive down the Bielorivka and you go to the wrong one just 15 miles up the road.
Yeah, that would suck.
Man, that would. You know what would suck even worse? Living in Russia.
So that would, actually.
So anyways, let's get right on into that news in the northern flank, where we saw the Battle of the Bakhmut raging on. And of course, we got a report from our boy, Medyar Igor! So let's see the clip.
Бажаю міцного. 12 лютого по обіду. Бахмуті досить тихенько. Але це така обманлива тиша. А в передмістях східної і південної частини тривають вуличні бої. А нарешті від завтра вже закриють доступ офіційно закриють доступ, ну, обіцяють, принаймні я чув, цивільних осіб до Бахмуту. Це варто було раніше, мабуть, зробити, щоб не наражати на небезпеку нікого. Сніжочок випав. Було дуже хмарність, зараз навіть сонечко на 15 хвилин вилізло.
Oh crap! Wait, hang on. I forgot. I was supposed to be reading this. I was just watching and listening. So I'll read it from here forward. We won't back up, but from here forward, I'll turn down his volume a little bit and read it. Because I saw MW Troll say, "Why don't you read it?" Sorry, man. Sorry, I forgot. It's important to ensure the sabotage groups do not infiltrate the city in small groups and endanger volunteers who come here with peaceful intentions to help locals. The entire ban, if it will actually be introduced, I consider timely and necessary. As it's not calm here, and although the situation is under control, it's under control of the military, and it's impossible to watch after every civilian. So hope for your understanding of this. The military will do what is possible to bring help to locals remaining here. But the presence of civilians who came to help is not needed. Bakhmut was, and is, and will remain Ukrainian. It's our main motto. But as you understand, the enemy is trying to regularly encircle the city on the flanks. And it doesn't necessarily depend on the direct defending of the Bakhmut fortress, but is a separate tactic realized by the enemy and dependent on the number of circumstances. As of now, everything is under control and relatively quiet. Oh, 1 second. And so there we go. I made sure to get that cough in. So with that, that's the end of Medyar's summary from the northeast, the northern flank, showing us what the battle's going on up there, and also giving us some updates on how the battle will continue to progress. It appears that the Ukrainians are seeing that the battle may have entered a critical phase and are now refusing civilians that lived in Bakhmut from returning, or citizens from returning, and also they are stopping press from entering the city as well, just in case the Russians were able to pull a quick one and encircle the city with those people inside. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the center of Bakhmut, where we saw the Odessa unit in action. They're not in Odessa, but they are in Bakhmut, and they are beating Russians around. When you hear the Tarkov piano playing in the background, so we're going to have to mute that.
Oh, they were about to lay down a trap.
Man, they were about to lay down a beat. We can see them moving around, firing at the Russians with some AA guns, firing some mortars at the Russians, firing some RPGs at the Russians, hitting the Russians, firing SPG-9s at the Russians, hitting the Russians some more. The Russians come climbing out of their foxholes, put them right back in them, make it a grave. You see them firing more SPG-9s? That's right, hitting the Russians again. You know, just when you thought you couldn't hit the Russians enough, they hit the Russians with rifles. Shoot at them a little bit more. Russians go crying. You see them continuing to fire. Look at that. Another RPG. Straight to the face. The Russians moving around. Drones watching them. They don't know that their time is nigh. When you see the Ukrainians riding around on buggies, making sure to get ready to deliver that action to them. Getting rid of some of their wounded. Making sure that they're taken care of. Firing off of the Russians again. And look at that. They're in a compound. That compound's not safe. Boom. Slamming in the forest. Moving around in the trees, they continue to try and look for Russians. Russians hiding in a house. It's on fire. Ukrainians in the tree line. Hit the Russians again. Moving on up. Checking some Russians taking naps. Put them to sleep even better. Give them NyQuil. Moving past some cemeteries. Moving into the sunset. Sunset. More like dig a trench. More like fire mortars. More like lay down that technical fire. Hit the Russians dead on. Russians, once again, start crying and seething. The bots come in here a little bit faster than normal, and they get quashed quicker than usual. Want to have some sleep? Watch us drop 40mm mortars on you all night and sleep under that. Driving down the streets pretty quickly, breaking all the speed limits, but the cops aren't around because the cops are also fighting in the defense of the city. Absolute Chad moments, but sadly a lot of destruction as well. When you see a Ukrainian right there literally teleport like some kind of a eldritch being. Look at this. Watch this, Matthew. Look. He's there and then he's gone. Boop, and he's gone. Nighttime. Daytime. Guess what? The battle's still on. Marching up to the front, giving some peace signs, and delivering peace to the Russians. They'll never be a warring group again because they won't have the ability to. Driving through the mud. Walking through the snow. Driving through more mud. The muddy conditions. Pretty rough stuff. But you know what's even rougher? The Ukrainian fighting spirit. And driving past that MiG-17. That MiG-17 goes hard. Ukrainian soldiers sitting in trenches, moving around vehicles, looking at destroyed vehicles, firing SPG-9s, firing RPGs, boom, right to the face. Ukrainian vehicles once again moving around, drones watching them, getting out of the car, loading up those SPG-9s again, or the RPGs, depending on what you prefer. Getting that thing ready. Dropping bomblets on the Russians. Russians, go to hell. Drones getting shot down, it seems. Firing AGSs. AGSs slamming right onto the Russians. Russians get splinters in their knees and shrapnel in their ass. Firing the AGS some more. Guess what? Trailer time. Load up the supplies, get them onto the front. Sniper time. Walking time. MiG time. Picture time. I feel like I'm narrating a children's book here. And with that, that's the end of the clip, but showing you a little bit of what the 204th Brigade is up to, and I hope that
Smirnoff Vodkin.
Wait,
what was that? Smirnoff Vodkin.
Yeah, in the bottom right. I don't know what that is.
What in the world?
But man, that's something. Anyways, that's the end of the clip. A huge shout out to Smirnoff Vodkin, who may have put that little intro in, or the outro. We're now moving on from the center of Bakhmut and the 204th, who's still fighting for the city, and moving on down into the area of Ivanivsky, where we got some more news to cover, and we reached $9.2 thousand. What the hell is going on around here? We can't even see y'all. But the Lee Spring Army is carrying this fundraiser better than the Ukrainians can carry around their steel balls. Let's go! Man, that's impressive.
They do that pretty well. I don't know if that outdoes that, but I mean, it's pretty close.
Hey, I mean, like if they pass over 10K, I will say that's a definite truth. So we're moving on into the southern front, into Ivanivsky, where we saw the Russians target a fighter. Did it go well? Maybe. Let's see. Look at that. It's that MiG that we just saw a second ago that people have been taking pictures around. Of course, we can hear them playing music, and we can see the artillery landing right around it as the Russians try and kill anyone who's trying to take a picture. Once again, giving you an idea of what kind of sickos they really are. So with that, that's the end of that clip. I don't know why I put that down in the southern front. I think that's because it's near the entrance of Bakhmut, and I found that it was somewhere around there. So with that, that's the end of our Bakhmut news today. It's getting less and less, but once again showing how the fight's still going on. Moving on into the Orlivka area, however, the fight is going a little bit differently down here as a Russian ammunition depot explodes. When you see the slag heaps of ore from the mines that once worked here, and we're going to mute that, and we can see an ammo depot smoldering and churning. Call this thing Amish, because I've never seen anything churn this hard before.
Oh, man.
And that thing's smoking. With that, that's the end of the clip. It looks like it's loading, but it's actually done with. And it's great to know the Ukrainians were able to get another Russian ammunition depot. We're now going to be moving on out of the area of Orlivka and into Pisky, because some Russian soldiers are once again pissed at their command, believe it or not, in Pisky, as they refuse to fight because they believe they're being thrown into a meat grinder. Who would have thought? It's not like the Russians are calling it lean ground beef. They're calling this alcoholic beef. So with that, here's the video.
Мы, граждане Калининградской области, призваны в рамках частичной мобилизации.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm supposed to read. Sorry, I keep on forgetting that this is Reading Rainbow. So let me turn down the audio here.
That guy's literally wearing a ski mask like a criminal robbing a bank.
Yeah, this guy. Give me your money, please. Why in the world does he look like Life of Boris? He looks like he's about to sit there. We're going to make shibboleki today. Oh, please.
And the guy in the middle is wearing underwear with 2 holes cut in the middle.
Man, he was like Patrick in SpongeBob SquarePants. The Panty Raid. And that's what he's wearing. Oh, God.
You know they removed that episode from TV.
Really?
Yeah, because they said it was too pervy, I guess.
Oh, come on. Come on. They let the Cat Cafe go on the James May show. They're not going to let the Panty Raid go on SpongeBob. What in the world is this world coming to? It's literally 1984. Anyways, moving on from that, let me read this off and let's get right into it. So, we are the residents of Kaliningrad Oblast, called up as part of partial mobilization in October of 2022, bleed. We belong to the territorial forces, territorial defense, what the hell, carried out protection of important objects in Kaliningrad Oblast. On the 5th, we arrived to Rostov to carry out the tasks given to us. Several times we changed our permanent location, bleed. As a result, we ended up in Donetsk, aka Detroit. The battalion was transferred under command of the DPR and turned from territorial forces, territorial defense, into infantry, that is, shock troops, to conduct assault operations, bleed. Иди нахуй! We do not refuse to complete set objectives, but we are not prepared for assaults. Our command is far away from us. Communication is practically non-existent. The command never comes to us. We go to command. We appeal to the government of Kaliningrad Oblast to take some constructive measures, as we are literally being sent to be slaughtered, bleed. Yesterday we were meant to go into an unreasonable attack as cannon meat to assault an area they couldn't take for several months, bleed. We all collectively rejected it, нет, bleed. Asking for help to sort out this issue, the iti nahui. Is moving forward, we won't be able to defend ourselves, bleed, and they'll be keeping coming and taking 2 to 3 to 5 people to assault, iti nahui. Our military IDs are not in proper order, bleed, without dates, bleed, no leaves are mentioned, bleed. There are no documents, bleed, no orders. We haven't been seen anything, just told we are now under full control of DPR. Our weapons include, that is, we're under full control of DPR to complete tasks set by them, which means assault. Once again, we are not trained, many of us are both young and older people, many 40 plus. People with disease and all corresponding complications. We went to hospitals on numerous occasions, bleed. With this in mind, we're asking collectively, from the whole battalion's name, to sort out this issue, bleed. Make constructive solutions, iti nahoy. Contract the command, and explain reasons why we were transferred to the DPR, bleed. Without documents and explanations of why our status was changed from territorial defense to infantry, bleed. That is, made us shock troops, or SOS-Truppen, bleed. And so with that, that's the end of that little video. It looks like they're not having a fun time again, and it looks like they just understood that they're expendable. Uh-oh. Soldiers being expendable. Who would have thought? And also, who would have ever thought the Russians would have treated them like that? Absolutely unbelievable. It's like they thought they were living in some kind of a country that cared for them or something. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that clip around Pisky. Suffice it to say, they're pissed off. And we're now going to be moving out of the Donetsk area because beyond that, there has been no frontline changes and no additional news. And so we're now going to be moving on into the southern front and past the Vuhledar area because that was covered earlier and into Staryl-Manivka, where we saw the 44th destroying more Russian artillery today. BMB right there, and it's on fire already, man. They started instant campfire out here. Tarkov music playing again, so we're gonna have to mute it. Well, you see them burning and roasting right there, very nice. And we can see a messed up beh right there in the tree line. You can see it, that long barrel. And is about to get hit as well. It looks like it's already been hit and it's now on fire. Whoops. And we can see a Gyansim Be. Beke. They're about to get that one too. We see it burning as well. And it burns so brightly. Oh, Fleet. Look, Matthew Bleat, it's floating orb, make wish.
Oh.
Let's see. Proso 44 Orkema, Artilleriska, Brigada, Imeni, Getramana, Danila, Dropstola, I believe, is what that says at the bottom. We could see the artillery still hitting the Bliet. And I've got to tell you, that's the best we've ever seen. It's better than the way the Chiefs slammed the Eagles tonight. Absolutely impressive. Absolutely wonderful. From top to bottom. No one's hit artillery like we have. We've been able to take out the Mr. Bs. We've been able to take out the Gansett Bs. Some of them call them very huge, much like me, in all the right places. Absolutely impressive. So with that, we're now moving on from that clip and even further on down the southern front, where we also saw in the area of Drozhnanka, a Russian SPG being destroyed. It was under a tarp. It was like one of those motorcycles you put out in the driveway. And also, we've reached 9.5 thousand. We're only
9.5?
We're only 500 away from 10K.
That's crazy. We'll reach that in no time.
That's crazy, man. No cap. So let's
Man,
watch
that's
this.
crazy.
Man, it's crazy, man. Oh, God, man. Anyways, let's get to this video. You see the SPG right there. It's under the tarp. They thought they were clever, but that really just gave it away a little bit better. Now that's a bright white object in a field. It got hit. It got blown up. It catches on fire. You can see the tarp was blown off of it immediately, and now you can see it's an SPG. Oh, wow, I didn't know that. I thought it was just a giant white blob in the field. There's no way there was any Russian military equipment under that thing. That's the end of the clip, and once again, another SPG destroyed. We're now going to be moving on into our last bit of news, I believe. No, we actually have one more after this. Near the area of Rykov, we saw a Czech vampire at work. This thing was sucking the blood out of the Russian forces, literally. Let's check this out. Music's busting, of course. You can see the vampire lined up to fire, and any second now. Any second. Oh, there it goes. Shooting off its rockets. Rockets for victory. Very nice bleed. Those quote-unquote shock troops on the front lines are about to be really shocked when they get unshock trooped. We now see them packing up the missile launcher immediately and getting on the move. Really neat to see, and hopefully they're able to hit the targets. We're now going to be moving on out of the Zaporizhian front here and on into the area of Nikopol. There was no news to report from the Kherson area today, and in Nikopol we saw evidence of shelling that occurred overnight from the Russian side near the area of the Zaporizhia reactor. We can see right here the shell holes and also the dirt that was thrown up on these buildings from the shelling, and also shrapnel that was hitting the buildings and destroying windows all over. Once again, unfortunate to think, we heard that a Ukrainian 53-year-old woman was killed and an 87-year-old woman was also injured. It appears that that 4 high-rise buildings and a college building were also damaged, according to the caption, and you can see the pictures and evidence of the damage right there. And once again, unfortunate to hear that a Ukrainian citizen was lost to a Russian terror attack, and hopefully the Ukrainians are able to pay that back 100-fold against the Russian forces tomorrow. We're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news in Nikopol, and that is all of the frontline news we have to cover today. And so with that, it's time for us to move to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 355 of the war in Ukraine, and also $9.5 thousand towards helping save the children. And so with that,
yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And so here's the speech from President Zelenskyy.
Здоров'я, шановні українці. Є черговий санкційний крок нашої держави проти атомної галузі держави-терористів. Своїм указом я ввів в дію рішення РНБО щодо санкцій проти 200 осіб, які працюють на російську атомку. Ми робимо все, щоб санкції проти російської атомної галузі стали частиною глобальних санкцій проти Росії за війну. Це не просто, є певний спротив, але був час, коли і інші обмеження проти Росії здавалися непростими. Здавалося, а зараз вони вже чинні. Наприклад, щодо нафти, нафтопродуктів з Росії. Всі елементи російської системи, які задіяні у війні, у забезпеченні терору та фінансуванні агресії, мають бути ізольовані від світової системи. Так і буде. Тим більше це справедливо для тих, хто брав участь у захопленні та незаконних діях на наших Запорізькі атомні станції, російський радіаційний шантаж світу має бути покараний. Зокрема, і про це ми будемо говорити на різних дипломатичних рівнях наступного тижня. Це буде не менш важливий тиждень для наших міжнародних позицій. Вже готуємось до запланованих комунікацій та переговорів. Дипломатичний марафон, який ми почали для посилення збройної та іншої підтримки України, не будемо переривати ані на тиждень. Хочу сьогодні особисто відзначити усіх, хто відновлює енергетичні спроможності нашої держави. Цей день, вчорашній, більшість українців пройшли без багатьох відключень електрики. І, звичайно, в окремих районах, на жаль, в окремих містах ще були обмеження, там, де ступінь руйнувань надто значний. Звичайно, що з початком нового робочого тижня споживатиме більше, а отже будуть графіки відключень. Але сам факт, що після постійних терористичних атак ракетами, шахедами, після масованого ракетного нальоту цього тижня ми можемо пройти такі спокійні енергодні, доводить професійність наших енергетиків та надзвичайну самовідданість кожного і кожної, хто працює заради забезпечення енергосистеми. Я дякую всім українським енергетикам, ремонтним бригадам, ДСНС, комунальним службам, обласної місцевій владі, які допомагали, та бізнесу, який залучався до відповідних робіт. Маємо усвідомлювати, ще це не перемога і не вирішальна на енергетичному фронті. І, на жаль, можуть бути нові удари терористів з Росії, можуть бути нові обмеження, якщо будуть нові руйнування і ріст споживання. Але сьогодні і вчора це чергове свідчення того, що працюючи разом та допомагаючи одне одному, українці роблять великі речі. Тому зберігаємо єдність, не втрачаємо жодного дня і жодного тижня. Все заради України. Я дякую всім, хто працює заради нашої держави. Слава кожному і кожній, хто в бою. Слава усім, хто боронить Бахмут, Vuhledar, Часів Яр, Мар'їнку, Авдіївку на всіх напрямках Донеччини, Луганщини та по всьому нашому фронту. Стійкість, єдність та взаємодопомога. І це наша сила. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, and that wraps up our day 355 news. I thank every single one of y'all so much once again for watching, and it's absolutely unbelievable to think that we're rounding out our news segment tonight with a grand total for our fundraiser of $9,500 for Save the Children. Unbelievable to think that the Lee Spring Army, even without being able to recognize a single individual beyond PSYOPs that has donated to this fundraiser, we've been able to get this far. Unbelievable, and it really shows that the fundraisers really have nothing to do with individual recognition. It's more so a thing the Lee Spring Army undertakes as its duty to do every single weekend. And I think that's something that's really been shown tonight, more so than any other night, because sometimes when fundraisers run and people put in massive donations, it's really cool to call them out. But even now...
Wait a minute. Hold up. Spencer's put in a 500. We had 10,000.
Oh! Oh, look at that. $10,000. We did it. We've reached it. $10,000. $5,000 over the $5,000 goal. And whenever this type of stuff happens normally, we usually get to credit it to a single person. But tonight, like, while we do know that Spencer did throw that in, getting us over the top, and thank you so much for that, it's really the entire Lee Spring Army that's done it, because we don't, at the end of the day, know the exact breakdown of who's donated what. So I got to thank the entirety of the Lee Spring Army once again for everything y'all have done tonight. This has been completely unbelievable to think that we've made it this far, and it shows that if the Lee Spring Army wants to do it, it can do anything. So with that, oh, Science drew in there, 69, nice. And so with that, that's the only one we can see, the only one. It's the whole night have been mine and PSYOPs. So with that, I thank the entire Lee Spring Army once again for getting this fundraiser to where it is. Of course, we heard that Trista and Spencer have been supporting the fundraiser a grand deal. And while we don't have the exact total, I thank both of y'all so much once again for helping out this fundraiser, along with every other person whose name is not known, but their efforts and their help to Ukraine will be known forever. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into our polls and our questions, and we will be here until 12:30 a.m. Eastern Time or 11:30 p.m. Central Time. And Matthew has been getting those bots like no other. I've been watching that every here and there, like a bot will come in and you get them. So with that, let's get to the polls.
There's nothing that gets the bots more riled up than a fundraiser for children. That brings the bots out in rare form.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
Like, you see more of them tonight than anything, even on a normal fundraiser night. But Save the Children, for some reason, has like bots that just like follow it like it's a traveling circus.
Yeah, it's almost like the bots are devils. But anyways, our first poll, we have 4 of them. The first one says, which nation do you believe is responsible for the balloons/objects? What is your best guess from the following choices? 77% said China, 14% said Russia, 8% said North Korea, and 2% said Iran. And that is actually structured the exact way I'd answer it. My number 1 choice would be China, second would be Russia, third would be North Korea, and my fourth would be Iran. Most obviously, I think it's China, but it could be Russia, since Ukraine says allegedly one was sent into their territory from Russia. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm going to be honest. I would also put it up that same way, but really, honestly, I put North Korea and Iran tied at the bottom, because have y'all seen toys like Woody's cousin that lives in Iran? Like, that thing's horrendous, and I don't think due to them having that horrendous creature, they would be less or more capable than the North Koreans of doing that. So I would put them on the same level as the North Koreans, but I think China first, Russia second, North Korea third, and Iran fourth. Or you can switch those two around. It doesn't really matter. So with that, I hope I've addressed that poll fairly well. And with that, we are moving on to the next one.
And next up, the second poll says 2 defected Wagner fighters claim that faltering soldiers were, quote unquote, to be shot on the spot. What are your thoughts? 57% said it's likely 100% true. 28% said, there's some truth to it. 6% said unsure, and 9% said they are completely exaggerating the story. Now, I'm sure they are exaggerating to sort of give people what they want to hear, but also I'm pretty sure that there is some brutality going on in the Wagner whole unit. Because, of course, they're incompetent, they're cruel, and I'm sure it happens. So I'm going to go with the 28%. But Enforcer, what say you?
Dude, those Wagner commissars, whenever a deserter comes around, they're like, it's 9 o'clock on the dot. I've got to get an execution on the spot. But moving on from that, I would say they're not exaggerating those stories at all. Because none of y'all, apparently, if y'all are saying that it's highly unlikely, have ever seen the sledgehammer video, where they killed a deserter by slamming his head in with a sledgehammer. So I would say they're not lying about that at all, because they actually took that bloody sledgehammer and gave it to, I believe it was Sergei Shoigu or Putin as a gift. I forgot which one it was, but Prigozhin gave it to him. So with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one says, when Russia loses this war, is it possible that Putin will remain in power afterwards? 39% said no, Putin will be removed or assassinated. 28% said yes, Putin could remain in power. 26% said it's very unlikely, and 7% said unsure. And I think that it is possible Putin could remain in power even if they lose in Ukraine, just because it seems like he has a pretty strong grip on Russia through whatever means he's built up. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say he will most likely, he may survive the war due to how the government's structured. Governments in Russia, and sorry y'all, I don't know why I'm yawning so much tonight, because I drank an excessive amount of coffee, and that's also helped me to make the jokes click a little bit better tonight, and it seems like y'all have noticed. But to try and answer that question, the Russian governments are usually made to exploit the lower classes of their society. So there really is no reason to overthrow a leader culturally in Russia. It's better to just like leech off of them as long as you can until they die, and then begin the new power struggle to see who will be on top of the whole exploitation thing. So I would actually say my bets are on his government and him may actually survive this war, although barely. So with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the last one says, when Russia loses the conventional war in Ukraine, will Putin launch nukes into Ukraine for the finale? 51% said no, he's not that crazy. 27% said unsure, and 22% said yes, he will go down hard with nukes. And I'm going to fall in the unsure category. That would basically mean the destruction of Russia if he did that, in my opinion. So I'm not sure if he's that crazy. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say he's probably not, because there's never been a precedent for that. When the Soviets lost Afghanistan, they didn't nuke Afghanistan, and they never nuked anyone else before. Also, I can hear a reverb of myself on your end for some reason.
I think you imagined that.
No, I actually hear things with my ears, and that was happening. But with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
I don't think anybody else heard that either. You're definitely imagining that.
No.
But anyways, that was our last poll. So with that being said, we're moving on to our questions. And first up, we have a question from Susan Lowell, who says, was there really a Chinese balloon over Ukraine today?
Real quick, Mai just said there's an echo. Everyone's saying there's an echo, so there's an echo. Also, can you reread that one again? Oh, there is. But can you reread that one again?
Susan says, was there really a Chinese balloon over Ukraine today?
We're not really sure whose balloon that was. It seems as though the Ukrainians are saying that it may have been a Russian balloon with some kind of deflectors on it. But we're not exactly sure whose balloon it was, but we're largely leaning towards the Russians. So with that, I hope that answers that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Steve Wolf, who says, do you think these spy objects can be looking for the best place to set off an EMP?
Nah, probably not, because you could probably tell that from satellite, and you could also probably just tell that from public information where the best places to drop an EMP would be, and I don't believe there's an actual device that operates as an EMP unless if it's a nuclear weapon. So, at that point it's already a nuclear war. So, with that, I hope that addresses the question fairly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
See, everybody's saying no echo. Even Barry Reading, he said Enforcer's hallucinating from the caffeine.
But then everyone said there was an echo too at the start. Because
I think they were just agreeing with you just to agree.
Well, real quick, Matthew, that happens before the stream when your microphone's unplugged. I can hear myself reverb then, and I heard it there. So just work with it instead of.
Wait, Colleen said, just joining as I had an intruder try to break into my house.
What the hell?
Colleen, are you good? Goodness.
Interesting. Keep us apprised of that story. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next question goes to Avari Mandabratis, who says, Enforcer, might the Chinese, Russians, or whomever be collecting targeting data that doesn't rely on GPS?
Maybe, but at the same time, you don't really have to rely on GPS for coordinates. So, it is what it is. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right. And our next one is going to go to, let's see here, Pakatang, who says, what NATO vessels are there in the Black Sea? If they were placed near the Ukrainian coast, could they block or prohibit missiles from being shot toward Ukraine?
They probably could, but there's a lot of questionability there as to whether that can actually happen or not. So I would have to say we would really have to see that set up and operate before we can get a clear answer as to whether it will work or not. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Portstan, who says, let's see here. Wait a minute, hold on. Thought it was all bot. Anyways, Cynthia Rodriguez has a question. She says, Enforcer, did you cover the water being taken back to Crimea and threatening the Zaporizhia power plant and may cause a nuclear disaster?
I haven't heard about the water being taken out of the Zaporizhia power plant's cooling pools, if that's what you're talking about. We actually covered that, I believe, yesterday or the day before on stream, and that is something that we haven't been able to confirm. We do know that the entire time the Russians have controlled any part of, I guess you could say, the Dnieper River, they've been diverting the water back into Crimea, because that's been something that has been going on for a little bit. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Jay Bagwell, who says, does the Russian Navy in the Black Sea have passage rights through the Strait in Turkey?
No, they do not. The Turks actually closed that off within the first, I believe, 2 weeks of the war, and they've never had the passage rights since, at least from our information. So, from what we know, none of the Black Sea ships can leave the Black Sea, and they're practically stuck within it. So with that, I hope that does answer that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Almadi20, I believe how it said, who says, did you ever think that you'd be having a serious discussion about the Air Force shooting down UFOs?
No, but at the same time, anything's a UFO if we can't identify what it is. So it's not that crazy, knowing that it was a, just a random object that was shot down. We don't really know what it is, because they could also call a drone a UFO too. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. It is a little weird to think that we're having to talk about it, but not that weird at the same time. So with that, we are on to the next one. I hope we answered that fairly well too.
And also, Spencer, I think you got us up to $11,000. I haven't been following the chat that close, but I
Holy
saw we just jumped
moly.
up to that, and I think it might have been Spencer. He said, let's make it 11,000, so it must have been him.
Good Lord. Well, thank you so much, Spencer. If that was all you, that was unbelievable. $1,000. We got up to 11K, $6,000 above the $5,000 goal. We are now way higher in terms of the extra amount we've raised tonight over the goal than the actual goal itself. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Jets115, who says, have you guys seen the video of the meteor over northern France tonight?
I have not seen the video of the meteor over northern France, so I'll have to declare ignorance on that one. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Bip Bip, who says, Enforcer, do you really think Russian soldiers are so dumb to fight on flat ground with no cover that they have no choice under killing menace of commanders, cannon fodder?
I don't really know what that question means. Do you know what that means, Matthew?
Do you think Russian soldiers are so dumb to fight on flat ground that they don't have a choice? They're saying, are they being coerced to fight in areas they know are dangerous to fight in because of fear of the commanders possibly, I guess, knocking them off?
No, I don't think it's more so the fear of the commanders knocking them off, because the commanders are always outnumbered by the enlisted, and the enlisted can mutiny and end up killing the officers. So it's most likely not that. It's probably that they're fighting in open areas because they have no other choice, and they're just not wanting to get individual repercussions taken against them. You don't always have to make it the threat of whacking an entire group of people. It just has to be certain individuals that start speaking out that will keep the fear running and keep most of them in line. And that's most likely the reason why they're continuing to attack in wide open areas. But they are that dumb. I wouldn't doubt it, because over 12 months of war, we've seen that they are that stupid. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Fuyuma, who says, the aviation term no visible propulsion doesn't apply to propeller drones and planes, or does it?
I believe it wouldn't apply to those. I believe no visible terms of propulsion most likely equates to some kind of an unpropelled balloon or a glider, but that would be my guess. I don't know if that falls into that area, because I feel like that would be a visible form of propulsion. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
The next one goes to Alpha 10, who says, do you think that the objects could pose a biological threat?
The biological threat?
Yeah, the objects that are being shot down?
Probably not, because I'm sure that there isn't someone launching these balloons around there that is hoping for us to shoot them down and then start infecting the entire United States with some kind of a chemical agent, because it would mostly be tracked back to them sooner rather than later, and we would end up blowing them away if it was that serious. So with that, I hope that addresses that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next question in the spreadsheet goes to Nick, who says, what do you believe is the best piece of equipment that the Ukrainians have? I believe it is the drones.
I believe the best equipment that the Ukrainians have right now would most likely be, yeah, it's just really hard to say because they've gotten a lot of stuff. I would say the Patriot missile defense system would probably be the best piece of equipment they have in store for them in the future. Not that they have right now, but it will be there soon, because the Patriot has a 99 to 100% success shoot down rate, and not only that, is able to defend the skies of Ukraine against practically anything that comes their way, which when it finally arrives, it'll be changing the way Russian missile attacks occur. They most likely will not be able to occur successfully beyond that, and it will also help the Ukrainians to strengthen the interior of their country and keep their vital war industries and any other war industry running. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well in my opinion, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next question goes to White Lightning 777, who says, is it true that the F-22 has liquid O2 on board to let it briefly fly to the edge of space at high altitude? The WikiLeaks article about it is completely gone.
Sadly, I can't really talk too much about any kind of propulsion or lift for balloons, because I don't really know a lot about balloons in the first place to know what they're capable of, what they're filled with, what they do, and how they travel. So unfortunately, I'd have to declare ignorance on that one because I don't really know for certain. So with that,
Well, that was he was asking in reference to the F-22, like the jet.
the jet. And what was the question again?
He says, is it true that the F-22 has liquid O2 on board to let it fly briefly at the edge of space at high altitudes? And the WikiLeaks article about it has been apparently removed.
I don't really know that for certain, and it seems kind of weird that there would be liquid nitrogen in an F-22, considering that that's so cold that it would most likely interfere with a lot of the aircraft systems, unless if the storage of the fuel was in a certain way, shape, or form that allowed it to do that. So I'm not really sure, and I would have to honestly declare ignorance on that. And so with that, I hope that addresses the question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, it sounds like Colleen is doing okay over there. Hopefully so. Apparently, she called the police. And the police told her to lock her gun up and put it away, which doesn't seem like very wise advice coming from law enforcement. But let us know, Colleen. Hopefully, everything goes good with that. And I personally wouldn't put it away if I were you. But up next, we have a question from, let's see here, Lokai, I believe, who says, have you heard about the merge between Dutch and German ground forces?
I have not heard about the merging of Dutch and German ground forces, so I would have to declare ignorance on that one, but let's pull that up. Dutch and German ground forces. Let's see here. Dutch army to merge land combat units with Germany when this year. The Netherlands is getting ready to integrate the rest of its combat brigades into the German army as the two allies join military forces amid increased security threats in the region after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Interesting. I did not hear about that, but that is really interesting here, and I wonder how that's going to develop here forward. It sounds like they're trying to, I guess you could say, streamline the unity of command in between German and Dutch forces. And that's a fairly interesting process and will probably lead to more efficiency if a war was to break out, as Dutch forces would be under direct German command immediately. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, or addresses the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And we just reached $12,000!
Oh, yes, sir! Jaga, jaga.
Absolutely impressive. And whoever did that, I got to thank you for doing that and helping us to get all the way up to $12,000 on the fundraiser and helping us to continue to help save the children of Ukraine through Save the Children. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a question from Christian Cruz, who says, what do you guys think will happen to people like Vladimir Solyev, killed by Russians, or will he change again to support Ukraine again when needed?
I believe that Vladimir Solyev will most likely just end up fading into obscurity and falling off. Usually public figure people like him that are just into media, they usually never get killed or end with an unfortunate demise unless if you're a journalist in Russia. That's another story. Usually people like him, though, eventually just fade into obscurity and fall into the background. Especially if Russia continues to survive, that's most likely what will happen to him, especially if there's a little bit of a change up in the government. If not, he may continue to stay on the front stage and just change his wordage and what he's saying to just fit the times. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next question goes to Duncan VR, who says, why can't Ukraine destroy Russian ships in the Black Sea that are firing missiles at cities? Baba.
The reason why is because their anti-ship missiles do not have the range to reach the Black Sea Fleet, but the cruise and ballistic missiles being fired from those ships do have the range to go into Ukraine. So that is why they're able to launch the missiles into Ukraine from sea, but the Ukrainians are not able to destroy the ships, is because they're out of range. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to, let's see, Leonce Pierre, who says, want to ask about the elephant in the room off the bat. What do you guys think about Chinese media reporting on an unidentified object that they are tracking over the Yellow Sea?
I think that is most likely I don't know, an honest statement coming from the Chinese seems to be highly unlikely. It may be true though, and it may be that these balloons, drones, whatever they are starting to show up around the world commonly, and it may not be from any of the powers we think they're from. They may be something else, and they're going to shoot it down, although we don't know if they actually shot it down yet or not. So I hope that addresses the question the best I can, but we don't really know a lot about that craft either, rather than the Chinese said they were planning and preparing to shoot the thing down. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And also, since we did reach that $12,000 figure, I saw Trister once say he put in about $2,500. And Trister, thank you very much for being so generous. That is extremely, extremely nice of you to do for a very good cause. So thank you very much. And our next question goes to Duncan VR. Once again, he says, is full mobilization in Russia already going ahead, just not announced? They conscript blind men now. Have they run out of people?
I would say that full mobilization hasn't happened yet because they would most likely make an official announcement for that. And we would also see massive indicators of full mobilization occurring. And we're not seeing any of that. We're not seeing the transition of consumer industry to war industry. We're not seeing a massive conscription of males across the country in any noticeable way. And we're not getting any reports from intelligence agencies indicating that either. So I feel like that's probably not happened yet, and we're probably not going to see that happen unless if there is an official announcement. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Marianne B., who says, any thoughts on George Friedman's idea that Russia is about to do a gigantic north-south pincer movement to catch the Ukrainians?
I have a feeling that they're probably not, because they did that at the beginning of the war, the whole north-south thing, and that didn't really pan out for them. So why in the world would doing that a second time pan out for them then? And also, what was the name of this guy?
George Friedman.
George Friedman. Well, let's see what this guy said. All right, so early life, career, not really a lot about his career or anything for that matter. Let's see, Austin, Texas, he resigned that year. He founded Geopolitical Futures. Forecaster geopolitical events led to the New York Times Magazine to comment in a profile, there is a temptation when you're around George Friedman to treat him like an 8-ball. Okay, well that's just hype. The next decade, Friedman argues how U.S. administration from the 2010s will need to create regional power balances, some of which have been distributed. Friedman conceptualized a successful U.S. management of world affairs not by directly enforcing countries, but by creating competing relationships which offset one another in the world's different regions. For example, in the past, Iraq blamed Iran, and currently Japan balances China. Friedman asserts this is the decade where the U.S. as a power must mature to manage its power and balance as an unintended empire and republic. Friedman's latest book was released in 2020 by Doubleday, while originally scheduled to be released in January of 2018. So I don't really see a lot here that's wrong with that. That's a pretty honest assessment of what the U.S. is kind of doing in a way, but not directly. That's not the actual plan to falling, but you see it falling into place here and there around the world. But I don't know about this whole north to south push thing, because that's what they did originally on February 24th last year, and that didn't end up working for them at all. So with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. But it looks like we finally fell upon a guy, at least at face value, looking into him initially. He seems to be one of the more level-headed analysts that we've ever heard of. So with that, we are on to the next one. And also, I hope you are all right up there, Colleen, because everyone's talking about, don't put the gun away, and everyone's saying this and that. Honestly, considering that you're in Canada and the gun laws are different up there, I don't really know what to do with a gun. And also, another thing is that here in Alabama, you have the castle doctrine and stand your ground and such things like that. So you could pretty much keep a gun on you, around you, and be ready to shoot the guy if you were in Alabama until the police arrived. But I don't know what the laws are in Canada, so I'm not even going to try and weigh in on that. But I hope you're safe, and hopefully nothing comes from bad to worse. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Hadaway, who says, is there a body double for Putin? He makes public visits, and there are leaks talking about it. I saw some very weird pictures. Looks like evidence. A Russian close to Putin said that.
I don't know if there's any body doubles. Well, there are body doubles, but I don't know if the body doubles are doing anything right now. I feel like that would be a little bit of a stretch. It seems that Putin has largely entered a hermit state, and he hardly comes out and makes any statements, and that's all we have to work off of right now. But I would definitely doubt that there are active body doubles going around and doing his bidding on TV like we've been seeing. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, in my opinion, and take it with a grain of salt. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Hoodoo, Texas, who says, I'm curious if the people here think that the West is doing all it can for Ukraine, or if they are just doing the minimum so that they can keep the Ukrainians in the fight.
I would say, in my opinion, the West is doing as much as they possibly can to help the Ukrainians. It's just that there's a misunderstanding in between what we're capable of doing and what Ukraine is capable of doing, because Ukraine started off this war with a land force of around 270,000, and they've had to try and quickly raise that number from 270,000 to around, I believe at this point, maybe around 600,000 entirely through this war in conventional training methods, and they're also trying to integrate brand new technology that they've never had any experience with into their military. All of this requires a decent amount of training time, and there's also a limited amount of I guess you could say capacity that the Ukrainians have to fill up units with tanks, ammunition, and weaponry from the West that requires additional training, because they have to train them first off for them to be able to use those weapons. So the Western world is supplying them with everything that they physically can use. It's just that it doesn't ever seem to be enough at a given moment to give the Ukrainians the upper hand completely and able to push the Russians out within a very small amount of time. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, at least from what I'm seeing. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And I think Hoodoo's gotten off for the night, but I'd have to say to Hoodoo's statement, it kind of seems to me like the West is just sending enough to keep Ukraine going. For example, they're not sending the fighter jets. They only sent the tanks after a whole bunch of begging. It seems like we could have sent that stuff without all the hoops to jump through. But I don't know. That's a pretty strong accusation to make, so I'm not going to necessarily make it. But it certainly has a little bit of a suggestion of that. But that's just my opinion. But up next, we have a question from Christian Cruz, who says, did you see Zelensky's speech in the EU Parliament where he said Slava Ukraine? And the Parliament answered Hiram Slava, and Zelensky cried a bit. A beautiful moment in politics.
I didn't see that, sadly, but it does sound very neat. And I'll make sure to pull that up and check that out after the stream, because I never heard of that or saw it, and I'll have to go and take a look at that myself. And it sounds like a pretty nice moment. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Bradley Walker, who says, I've been wondering if the 3 objects shot down after the Chinese balloon weren't just home-built craft released by copycat agents in the U.S. to sow paranoia. And I highly doubt that, to be honest.
I would highly doubt that, because they're coming from the northwest of the continent, and that would be very weird to think that all of these copycat groups have somehow made it to Prudhoe Bay and started throwing up balloons to then fly over the rest of the United States. So I would highly doubt that. I'm not saying it's completely out of the realm of possibility, because, you know, nothing's really off the table, in my opinion, except for aliens. But you know, I feel like that's highly unlikely for the most part. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to, let's see here, Angry Toaster, who says, would Russian naval assets outside of the Black Sea be considered legitimate targets for Ukraine? If they use some unmanned water drones, could that escalate the conflict?
Can you reread that one again real quick?
The Angry Toaster says, would Russian naval assets outside of the Black Sea be considered legitimate targets for Ukraine if they use some unmanned water drones, and would that escalate the conflict?
It could technically be, Russian naval targets could technically be hit anywhere around the world, considering that Ukraine's at war with them. However, there would be a problem with getting those little kamikaze boats out of the Bosphorus Strait and also giving them enough range to hit the wide open seas. So I would say that's highly unlikely to do, unless if Ukraine started getting foreign support and allowing these kamikaze boats and Ukrainian forces to base inside of foreign countries, which would largely incriminate other NATO countries into this conflict directly. So I feel like it's highly unlikely, but there's really nothing the Russians could do to escalate the war beyond that, considering that anyone's shipping is not off the, I guess you could say, table to strike and attack unless if you are not involved in the war. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a question from Tom A, who says, do you think China is saying that there's an object in their sky that they're going to shoot down? Later they will say it's a USA device just because USA shot theirs down.
They probably are doing that, and that's why they're making the statement so vague and so weird. Like, in several hours, we plan to shoot it down. Like, you don't hear that from the United States. We shoot the thing down. We say, we detected something, and we've decided to shoot it down, or we've already shot it down immediately. And the Chinese are saying, there's something flying above us. In 3 hours, make sure to tune back in because we're going to be shooting it down then. That was really weird to me, and I think that may be indicating that this is some kind of a propaganda thing, unless if they're able to get some kind of actual physical evidence to show that this thing did exist and they did shoot it down. So it may be for that reason, for all we know. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And whatever happened to that balloon that was going through Latin America? What if that's just the balloon? It's made its way back around like the world, back to China, and they're about to shoot down their own balloon.
Nah, probably not, because it would have had to have flown on a jet stream over there, and then it would have had to reverse right back, and wind speeds across the world don't change that quickly, so that's probably highly unlikely. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Stacy Bashford, who says, is it true that Poland is training Ukraine pilots on the F-18s, and if so, why?
It is, from what we know, somewhat true. We don't really have enough verification for that, though, to actually say with certainty. They may be doing that. We know that the British are starting a training program in the future, near future, for the Eurofighter Typhoons, and Ukrainian pilots to train on those. But beyond the indication that the Polish may be doing that, and I haven't really seen that from a large amount of credible sources to really confirm that, we don't really know for certain. On top of that, I don't know if the Polish actually fly F-18s, Poland Air Force aircraft. I think they might, because the Swiss also fly. No, they actually just fly the F-16s and the MiG-29s. So it'd be really weird for the Polish to be running a training program on an aircraft that they've never flown in their Air Force. That would probably be a Swiss thing to do, considering that the Swiss are the ones who fly, I think, most, or a decent amount, of the F-18s that are owned by a European nation. And then they're neutral, and they wouldn't do that. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And also, we hit $13,000.
Hey, let's go! $13,000. We just keep on going well above what I thought we would do tonight. And I've got to say, for this to be Super Bowl night, we are really making it far. And it's been incredibly impressive. And so, I got to thank the entire Spring Army again for helping this fundraiser to get this far. $13,000. We're now, I believe, $8,000 above our actual goal tonight of $5,000. And if it wasn't for the Spring Army, this goal and how far it's gotten tonight would have never been possible. And we haven't been able to recognize a single one of y'all either, which shows that y'all are entirely dedicated to just supporting Ukraine for the hell of it and for no other reason. So I got to thank y'all all once again. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And the next one goes to Epic Scorpion, who says, China has become increasingly belligerent in the last few years to many of its neighbors. Do you see, or do you foresee, a reduction in support for Ukraine should China invade any of its neighbors?
I don't see any reduction of support to Ukraine. I believe that would actually be an increase, because it would show that there is a common enemy sphere being made against the Western world and between the Russians and the Chinese, and you will probably see most militaries' budgets increase drastically, and foreign support to whatever country China's invading, whether it be India, Vietnam, Taiwan, whoever, they would get support, and the Ukrainians would probably also get increased support as well. And then we would also be building up and mobilizing our military at the same time. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, at least off of my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Roy Hughes, who says, Enforcer, those grenades are lacking enough firepower that cannot manage to take out two guys when it hits their hole directly. Need more powder in them things. Roll Tide.
And roll tide. And I would say maybe, although those grenades come from the factory with a set amount of powder in them, and it's not really the powder that gets the guys, it's more so the shrapnel that comes from the explosion. So it's more so about probably making a larger grenade with more shrapnel instead of more powder, because the powder will just increase the velocity on those pieces of shrapnel. But still, good point. I think they should up the size of the grenades, or at least up the size of the boom. And so with that, I hope that addresses that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to John Luke Sills, who says, is it possible that there's a black operation deep in Russia from Ukraine forces?
It's possible, although I would consider it highly unlikely. That's mostly partisans that are doing that kind of work, and we've never seen true proof of the Ukrainian special forces conducting some kind of operations inside of the deep interior of Russia. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Pakistan, who says, does Turkey's closure of the straits to all navies undermine the Montreux Convention, which allows them to block belligerent nations and put NATO at a disadvantage in the Black Sea?
I think that it doesn't really undermine any conventions. It is Turkey's right, after all, to shut down the Bosphorus Strait to anyone they want. And I don't really think it's disadvantaging NATO by any means. In fact, it is a fairly decent measure to ensure that NATO and the Black Sea Fleet do not get into any kind of naval skirmishes, considering that none of them are allowed to travel near each other. The Black Sea Fleet may as well be in the kiddie pool in the Black Sea, and the NATO fleets are allowed to hang out in the Mediterranean. Even still, with the U.S. fleet hanging out in the Mediterranean, we could still hit the Russian Black Sea Fleet all the way from the Aegean Sea in between Greece and Turkey, or all the way out near Cyprus. We could actually fire over the area of, what's this, Asia Minor, or there's another name for this peninsula. I forgot the name of it. Anyways, Turkey. We pretty much fire over the entire thing from north to south and hit the Black Sea Fleet where they are right now with some of the weapons that our ships can carry. We're also aircraft carriers. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Gabriel Mum, who says, if the Chinese wanted to, do you think that they can make Russia win the war when winning is defined as conquering all of Ukraine's territory?
I don't think they could. The only thing they would be able to provide is support through military and economic means, and that still, while helping out the Russians, doesn't mean that we get matched. We could just start to match China's support and then double it, and then help out the Ukrainians a whole lot more. And eventually, through the supply battle and the economic battle occurring in the background by proxy, we could probably ensure that the Ukrainians could defend their ground and hold it against the Russian-backed Chinese. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. Also, everyone said it's Anatolia. Sorry for everyone. I forgot that it's called Anatolia. I was trying to think of it. I was about to say Ankara, but that's the capital of Turkey, so that doesn't work. But it is, in fact, Anatolia. And so with that, I hope we answered that question fairly well and also corrected that. And we are on to the next one.
And for our next question, we have one from Walter A. Lakota Jr., who says, it seems that AFU is holding the line for now, as it is too early for a decisive offensive, as they, meaning the AFU, for now are trying to draw out the Russians along the front line. What say you?
I would say that's largely true. They are waiting for their large offensive, and in the meantime, they're trying to wipe out as many Russian forces as they can, and that's why they're doing such things as defenses in depth and allowing the Russians to dig a grave for themselves in Bakhmut, Vuhledar, and other areas. So with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Christian Cruz, who says, the Kremlin-backed hacker group Killnet claimed earlier today that they are behind the hacking of NATO websites. It looks like it's maybe just a DDoS, and is that an Article 5 violation?
Sadly, it's not, because that's not a direct military attack with weaponry onto Western infrastructure or militaries. So sadly, I don't think that falls under Article 4 or Article 5, but it is kind of close. It's kind of getting into that area. But then again, cyber warfare is something that no country has really deemed to be serious, although it is serious. So you can practically do anything you want in the cyberspace and get away with it if you're a group or a country. And on top of that, that group could be argued by NATO to try and avoid any kind of escalation, that they're not really a part of the Russian government or anything similar, and they're just a group of people, so they can't really take action against the Russians because that's just a group of people in Russia for some reason. But then again, that didn't stop us from invading Afghanistan. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, and this one goes to Philip Fixes, who says, could the main roadblock to jets be that Ukrainian armaments won't mount to Western fighters, so it will have to include missiles and bombs?
That probably is one of the larger hindrances to Western aircraft being used in Ukraine, because Western aircraft use Western weaponry, and there's a lot of it, and it's fairly expensive, and you can't really use Soviet weaponry on Western aircraft. So that's probably one of the bigger reasons why we're not seeing them, is because the supply of constant weaponry and parts to keep those aircraft running would most likely be fairly expensive for us to help out the Ukrainians with, and that may be one of the reasons why we're not supporting them with that. The other reason may be that some of the concerns they bring up are serious, like the runways being too short for F-16s to land on because they have to land very softly, otherwise the gear overloads and it breaks. So that may be one of the reasons why we're seeing them not being delivered to Ukraine. So with that, I hope that we answered that question fairly well, and it is time for the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Richard Rohde, who says, did the recent delivery of counter-artillery radars result in these increases in artillery losses for Russia?
Can you reread that one again real quick?
Richard said, did the recent delivery of counter-artillery radars result in these increases in artillery losses for Russia?
I'm not really sure, because the numbers have varied so greatly from day to day, and I'm sure that's not going to be turned on one day and then start inflicting massive numbers. It'll most likely take some acclimation to get used to, and then finally use it properly. So I would say it may be contributing to the increased numbers. We're not really sure, because they fluctuated so greatly over the past week. So with that, I hope we answered that question fairly well. And believe it or not, it's time for us to end tonight's stream at $13,000 raised for Save the Children. An incredible amount. Unbelievable. We don't have the exact figure right now, but it is over 13,000. And also, the Lee Spring Army being here in record numbers tonight. We actually passed 7,000 live viewers for a good while in the stream, and also it's just been an unbelievable night all around. Fundraiser, how many of y'all have shown up, and also it's Super Bowl night, which really blew me away that we got so many viewers and we raised so much support. And so with that, I've got to thank you all so much once again for watching tonight. It's been an amazing night. It's been incredible. And while we can't name out anyone except for PsyOps and me who has supported tonight's fundraiser because for some reason it just never showed up, I thank every single one of y'all who's helped to support that fundraiser for helping it to get so far. It's been absolutely unbelievable to think that we've made it here, and without the Lee Spring Army, none of this would have been possible. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for supporting the fundraiser, and I will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 48 hours of the war in Ukraine. We will not be airing tomorrow, but make sure to subscribe and hit the bell button so that way when we come back, you know when we're here, because it's the same time every night, 6 days a week, except for Mondays. Good night, take care, good luck, and Slava Ukraini!
Slava Ukraine!
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Ще не вмерла України, ні слава, ні воля. Ще нам, браття українці, усміхнеться доля. Згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці. Запануємо ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького